Broughton, head of Boston Public Radio.
This World Cup will be her last. The games kick off in just over a week. NBC Sports' Trini Casey joins us for that story. Plus, runner Sha'Carri Richardson, who was disqualified from the Olympics for marijuana use, just took first place in the women's 100 at the U.S. Track and Field Championships. All that and more to come. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The heavy rain has eased in New England, but not the danger from flooding. Vermont remains under a state of emergency amid catastrophic flooding damage. Water may overtop a dam near the capital, Montpelier. Parts of downtown Montpelier are already underwater. Other parts of Vermont have been cut off by flooding. The sudden heavy rain has been shocking. NASA's Gavin Schmidt says because of global warming, the atmosphere is holding more water.
When it rains, when we get that water vapor condensing into clouds and then rain, it can be more intense. There can be more rain happening when it rains.
Flash flooding killed a woman in New York this week. Several months ago, the White House began warning about an emerging illegal drug threat in the U.S. The veterinary tranquilizer xylazine was being combined with fentanyl, resulting in more overdose deaths. NPR's Deepa Shivaram says the Biden administration is now detailing a plan to address the problem.
The new plan from the Office of National Drug Control Policy will beef up testing, tracking, and treatment for drugs laced with xylazine. Dr. Rahul Gupta, the director of the office, says xylazine has now been detected in nearly every state.
We thought fentanyl was dangerous. Fentanyl combined with xylazine is even deadlier.
The administration says it will also work to determine where xylazine, better known as tranq, is coming from and how to control regulation of the substance. Gupta says federal agencies will inform him of how they will implement the plan in the next couple of months. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News, Washington.
Federal regulators say they're ordering Bank of America to pay more than $100 million to customers. That's for double dipping on some fees, opening some accounts without customers' agreement, and keeping back some reward bonuses. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says the bank will pay about $150 million in fines. Ukraine's president is heading to the NATO summit in Lithuania today as the alliance discusses a membership path for his country. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv.
In a message posted to social media, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said it would be absurd for NATO not to admit Ukraine. He said continued uncertainty over Ukraine's membership is motivation for Russia to, quote, continue its terror. Uncertainty is weakness, he wrote. Zelensky says he's received signals that NATO allies want to add conditions to Ukraine's membership invitation and that they're refusing to commit to a timetable for his country's entry. Zelensky's pessimism contrasts with his foreign minister's upbeat assessment on Monday that NATO allies appeared poised to shorten Ukraine's path to membership. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
On Wall Street, the Dow is up 138 points. It's NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. People recently released from jail face big barriers when it comes to finding work. And Massachusetts is now trying to address that problem with a $2.5 million grant for workforce training. GBH's Chris Burrell has more.
About half of the people coming out of the state's prisons and jails are unemployed a year after their release. That's the reality facing thousands of men and women trying to rejoin society after serving time. State officials say the workforce program will train and help employ about 300 people next year in food services, clean energy, and manufacturing jobs. More than a dozen nonprofits across Massachusetts are partnering with county sheriffs and with local businesses that need workers. Chris Burrell, GBH News, 89.7.
Letting the mothership know that I'm hearing an echo. There is no swimming allowed at a wildlife area on Nantucket right now. Local federal officials have closed Great Point to swimming indefinitely after reports of shark sightings and the deaths of 5 seals. The Nantucket Current reports that it's the first time that area has been closed because of sharks. In sports, the Major League Baseball All-Star Game is tonight. Go team. And in the forecast this Tuesday, sunny and upper 80s today. A hazy, hot, and Henry day. Clear sky, 70 degrees overnight. More of a hazy, hot, and Henry day tomorrow. Temperatures in the low 90s. And then Back to a chance of showers in upper 80s on Thursday. It is right now 77 degrees in Boston, very muggy. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. And the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do on Tuesdays and then again on Fridays. And we are streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Plus, Mayor Michelle Wu is going to be here at noon for another edition of Ask the Mayor. She'll be with us for an hour taking our questions and yours. Good morning, Jim.
And if you want to ask her a question face-to-face, our colleagues are sitting right over there. You can ask her a question from the library. Before we get started, we were both off yesterday. I didn't want to miss an opportunity to do some acknowledgement of a fabulous piece of reporting that a member of our team, Hannah Loss, did yesterday.
It was great.
That story about House of Seven Gables intersecting with the dangers of climate change was just really a wonderfully told and important piece, and congratulations to Hannah.
And very upsetting about the rising waters there in Salem and everywhere.
Indeed.
And I know that you are too modest to mention, Jim, your spectacular effort on Saturday in the Boston Globe.
Thank you, Margaret.
About home rule petitions. It was a tough piece, Jim, very tough.
Well, it was actually off our discussion with guest, the mayor, about rent control right here in Boston. Thank you.
I'm sure she read it beginning to end.
Well, I don't know. In any case, in less than a week, the new social media app Threads has racked up more than 100 million users. That's faster than ChatGPT did. That's according to CNBC. It's Mark Zuckerberg's response, as we know, to Twitter, owned by Elon Musk. Twitter's been a relative dumpster fire the past few months since Musk took over, promoting hateful content, leaving many users looking for an alternative. But is Threads really our social media savior, considering Zuckerberg's allowed Facebook to radicalize users by promoting extreme content, not doing so hot on user privacy? So we're just left to choose between two wealthy evils, two guys favoring their bottom line above promoting democracy and a healthy public discourse, or regardless, are you saying any way to get away from Elon Musk is fine with me, and is Threads, at least for now, your answer, like another 100 million people have chosen? 877-301-8970. That is the number to call and text. I was about to say, and I laughed even before I spoke, so Marjorie.
Yes.
Have you transitioned to Threads?
I have not. I'm still figuring out how to delete my Twitter
account. Yeah.
And as soon as I figure that out, but I'd rather be at, I mean, it's a fine line, I guess,
it is a
basically.
fine line.
But I think I'd rather be at Threads, and I will be soon, than at Twitter, because I can't take Elon Musk on any numbers of fronts. But I'm really curious about what people think about the matchup. Apparently there's going to be a mano-a-mano kind of matchup, Elon Musk
cage match, they've talked about it, yeah.
And you know, Zuckerberg has been practicing his jiu-jitsu, and he did something called the Murphy Challenge. You know about this? The Murph Challenge, actually. You run a mile with a 20-pound weighted vest, followed by 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and then another mile. That is pretty impressive. And then this story that's talking about the matchup between the two men, this is from New York Magazine, points out that Elon Musk looks like your average out-of-shape 52-year-old with a case of extreme paleness. And they gave paleness. Apparently,
paleness. He's pasty. He's pasty looking.
He's much taller. He's 6'1". Zuckerberg is little. He's only 5 foot. He's only 5'7", and he was in a chokehold in a wrestling tournament, and he seemed to be snoring, an indication that he was losing consciousness. But Mark Zuckerberg says that wasn't true. He was just snorting, and he was fine.
Let me ask you a question.
What?
What are we talking about again? I thought we were talking about
the cage match.
Okay, fine.
Between Elon Musk
okay, I'll try to get it back on
Zuckerberg.
track. And by the way, Marjorie is deciding she will decide Twitter versus Threads based upon the winner of the cage match, she told me this morning. So here's the deal. There are 250 million users, give or take a little, on Twitter. There are 100 million users in a week, or at least 100 million people have signed up, including me, by the way, on Threads in the first week. I mean, this, you know, there was Mastodon, there was all these other things. None of them really generated a lot of excitement or zillions of users. Apparently, Threads has done this, and it would seem to me they have the potential to sink this $40 billion investment that Elon Musk made. Now, he can afford $40 billion, but it's not nothing, as they say. So we want to know if you're making the switch. I have to say I'm playing both sides of the aisle here. I have not deleted my Twitter account. I have signed up for Threads. And by the way, I just want to say in my own defense, which I know is not going to, do much, there's still no direct messaging. You can't do Threads on your desktop, which for longer tweets is my choice rather than doing it on my phone. So maybe that's just whining. Well, and I assume all those things will come, but they're not quite there yet.
The number is 877-301-8970. The point I was making about the cage match, Jim,
what was it
is
exactly?
It's kind of an odd situation where people who run companies, and this is just not, back in the day, running Ford Motor Company, that's a big deal, obviously, running General Motors. But these people command hundreds of millions. In the case of Zuckerberg, we're up to, what, a billion people, something like that are on
2.7 billion.
Yeah. So you kind of like to think that people that are at that level in their careers are kind of people with maturity, and they've got judgment, and they've got wisdom and restraint. And then instead, it's these two guys that, Mark Zuckerberg, we talked about the most dangerous man in the world a couple of years ago, and we had that whistleblower from Facebook get up and talk about how Facebook could, if they wanted to, be much more diligent about getting rid of hate speech and lies, et cetera, that they just don't do it.
And
they don't
dangers,
really care.
particularly to young kids, particularly young women.
Yeah, all that kind of thing. And this other guy, Elon Musk, who I think is a rather odd man. And these are the two people, you know what I mean?
Okay, so apparently we have a little bit of a divide here this morning. You can call 877-301-8970 and talk to Marjorie about the cage match. Or you can call 877-301-8970 and talk to me about social media alternatives and if Threads is your choice. By the way, speaking of cage matches, since that's your topic of choice, and while you're ridiculing this, if Joe Biden tomorrow announced that he was challenging Donald Trump to a cage match, would you not drop everything and move to whatever community the cage match was going to happen in and just sit outside till the tickets became available?
We're mad at Joe Biden, at least some of us are. We're going to talk about later with John King about the seventh grandchild that he is not acknowledging.
I'm with you, actually,
which
and
is
Maureen Dowd.
Crummy. I didn't even know about it until I read Maureen Dowd's column over the weekend. But in any case, I think the cage match kind of says it all, Jim. Imagine Lee Iacocca back when he was trying to resurrect Chrysler.
He ran Chrysler about 400 years ago.
Well, it wasn't 400 years ago.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, but he was a big hero. You wouldn't see him engaging in a cage match with the guy from General Motors,
No,
would
that's
you?
a very good point.
You wouldn't.
No, you're really raising a really important issue, by the way, particularly an issue that's not going to happen. 877-301-8970. I just want to know if you're going to Threads. 100 million people have gone to Threads, so I assume a ton of you have. I have. And by the way, it's quite simple. I did have a little assist from Cy, who was our colleague on the IT team here. But it's simple. But again, the desktop is important to me, and I assume he's going to get there quickly. It's very similar. If you haven't done it yet, it's very similar to Twitter. It's very easy to use, except for the absence of the desktop thing. And we want to know if you're making the switch. And if you're making the switch as a political statement, it's finally a way to get away from Elon Musk. This is, of course, coming from a guy who bought a Tesla 8 months ago. 877-301-8970.
Did you mention already that it's
cage
surpassed...
match? No, I didn't.
No, not the cage match.
What's that?
The Threads has surpassed chatbot,
ChatGPT. In first week,
So, that's pretty incredible, too.
It is incredible.
That it's moved that quickly. And, I think a lot of people in general are getting fed up with Facebook because they're just tired of having to answer everybody's birthdays and all these...
But he's not doing this as an alternative.
He's not.
He owns Facebook.
But the point I'm trying to make here is that I think some people are trying to get away from social media in general. So, I don't know. Do you want to get rid of Twitter and then go to Threads?
Well, yeah, but I don't think that. I think this is purely a Threads. I'm no, as you know, tech expert. I think this is purely a Twitter versus Threads battle. TikTok is the king at the moment, who all of these guys are trying to figure out how to compete with, and so far neither Musk nor Zuckerberg has figured it out. 877-301-8970. You want to say anything more about the cage match before we take some calls?
No, but I just think. Can I even say what Elon Musk?
Well, you can't say the word. You can say what he said without the actual word.
Okay, that they get out a measuring stick.
They should get it. Elon Musk said what? Go ahead, tell people.
That he and Zuckerberg should get out a measuring stick.
Of what?
And measure something.
Measure something. That's right. An appendage.
An appendage.
I mean,
that's
the guy
right.
is a little. We're not supposed to say nuts publicly anymore. Elon Musk is borderline.
I mean, I should mention that President Trump kind of alluded to those things during the debate when he was accused by Mark Rubio of having small hands, and everybody knew what small hands meant. So
what did that mean?
That was the same thing Elon Musk was talking about, getting on a measuring stick, and so that was the President of the United States. But it does seem odd for captains of industry to be going to this level. I mean, we did have Howard Hughes. He was a little bonkers.
Can I say one more thing about Marjorie?
What?
I mean, the old line really fits. You can take the woman out of the Boston Herald, but you can't take the Boston Herald
That's right.
out of the woman. I
That's
mean, that
right.
is the bottom line.
Proud of
is
it.
Not?
Lynn from Boston, thank you for calling.
Oh, my God.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. Lynn.
This is, maybe you mean Lauren. I'm not so sure.
I'm sorry.
I meant Lauren.
Sorry.
Marjorie meant Lynn. Hi, Lauren. How are you? Nice to have you. What's going on?
Either way, I'll answer anything. So just two quick comments. One is, I haven't touched my Twitter account in years, so I'm not really that interested in either. But it will be an interesting game to watch. And the other point is, if Trump and Biden were engaged into a cage match, I would fully put my money on Biden. I think that Trump would have a heart attack in the first 30 seconds. Right?
Hey, Lauren, we have a bad connection, but did you refer to Twitter as quitter? Because if you did, that's pretty clever for those of us who should be leaving.
Yeah, Twitter.
I like it. Hey, Lauren, it's a bad connection, so we got to let you go. But I'm with her. Would you not agree? I can't believe I'm falling for your crap. Biden would run rings around Donald Trump, would he not, in a cage match?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Biden looks pretty frail. Donald Trump does not look frail.
I think he looks pretty fit. Did you see the pictures of him on the beach over the weekend in Delaware in the British tabloid?
Right.
He looks thin. Terrific. He's not just thin. He's a fit 80-year-old guy.
He's a fit 80-year-old guy. That's right. He's probably doing jujitsu too, just like Mark Zuckerberg
Marjorie's
is.
Googling cage match on her phone as we are. You know, when you get stuck like a little kid on something, let's go to Tim in New Hampshire. We're talking about the rise of threads. And by the way, I have the number right. It is 250 million on Twitter, right? I mean, if I'm right about that number, our colleagues are checking. To go to 100 million in a week means it's not impossible that a few days from now, there are going to be more, users, at least registrants on Threads than on Twitter, which is stunning. Let's go to Tim in New Hampshire. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Good morning, guys, and thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm not on Twitter. I'm probably not going to be on Threads either, but I would like to make a brief comment about the middle school.
Hey, Tim, you have this. Tim, I hate to stop you. You have the same problem as the first Lauren. It's a horrible connection. We're going to put you on hold. We're not hanging up. We're just going to put you on hold and hope that you're in a better spot in about 30 seconds when we get right back to you. Eileen and Hanson. Hey, Eileen, welcome.
Hi, guys. Long-time listener, second-time call. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. Well, I'm just calling because I only got on Twitter because of our president's tweets. Mm-hmm. I just felt like I had to hear the insanity firsthand instead of on the news.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they silenced him, I was so happy. And the day they gave him his voice back, I canceled Twitter then.
Really? You're a person of principle.
I've been off. Yeah, I just couldn't listen to him anymore. I didn't feel, after Elon Musk took over and then they gave him his voice, I said, forget it. So when Threads came on, it was so easy to get back on through, Instagram. And so I signed up right away.
Yeah, that is, we should mention that. You got to get on Instagram to get on Threads. That's part of the prerequisite. But lots of people love Instagram.
But even if you're not using it, I don't use Instagram, but I'm registered. You just register and then you can create your Threads account. Eileen, that's a principled position and we admire you for it. Thanks for the call. Even though, to my knowledge, which doesn't undercut what Eileen's saying at all, I don't think Trump has tweeted since Musk allowed him back on the platform. I also want to make clear, Musk says with the 250 million figure, according to Musk, I have no idea if he's telling the truth, are daily active users. They're not 100 million, obviously, active users. There are people who signed up for Threads in the 100 million category. So there's probably a little bit of a wider gulf But having said that, that's still a hell of a lot of people to sign up in the 7 days.
Yeah, it is, and it dwarfs the other efforts. You know, that Jack Dorsey, you had to be invited apparently to join his new site. He's the Twitter co-founder.
What is his new site?
He's got something called Blue Sky.
Oh yeah.
And that's only signed up 265,000. As I said, that's an invitation thing only. True Social, which is former President Trump's site, has an estimated 144,000 and 607,000 monthly users. Yeah,
wow.
Not that many at all.
Do you know why I didn't seek an invitation to Jack Dorsey's Blue Sky? I've mentioned this to you before. My position, I hope this is not unprincipled, until Dorsey said he's willing to have a cage match with somebody in the high-tech industry, my attitude is a pox on him. I don't even want to deal with him. Tim, apparently you have better connection. You're in New Hampshire. Welcome to the show. Hi, Tim.
Hi, guys. We'll try this again.
That's good.
I've never been on Twitter, and I don't plan on doing so soon. But I do have a comment to make about our middle school billionaires.
Yeah.
And that is that I don't know about Zuckerberg, but Elon Musk is walking, talking proof that great wealth and intelligence are not necessarily synonymous. And that's it. Thanks.
Well, can I tell you, before you go away, I would say great wealth and maturity are not synonymous. The guy created, this Tesla thing, and it's not just because I own it, is really a world-changing kind of thing. And so I don't question his brain power, but he is, like you say, he's like a middle schooler. He's like a little boy. Tim, thank you for your call. I'm glad the connection got better.
Brain power in a certain area, then. He's got it in one area and not in another, which, it seems fair to me.
But doesn't he appear, when you hear him talk, isn't there like an Arrested Development kind of thing with him? Almost every time he speaks, I've always found that to be the case, long before I felt contemptuous towards him.
Well, I saw him on Saturday Night Live 2 or 3 years ago when he was co-hosting.
With his mother? With his mother?
Yeah, his mother, who's this beautiful woman.
Yeah.
She was a model for, I think she still does do modeling, and she seemed totally normal. But he was talking about his oddness, admitting his own oddness, which was kind of likable that he did say he's kind of an odd guy.
Did you watch that whole show when he was on SNL?
I don't remember if I watched
did,
the whole
and
thing.
in the final segment, right before the end of the show,
Yeah.
he had a cage match with his mother, and I thought it was so disrespectful of an older woman, someone who raised him. He just threw her to the ground, sat on her, pinned her,
right.
and that was the end of it.
Well, that's one of his legendary moves.
Which move is that?
That's called the walrus.
Oh, you said that.
Elon
What's that
Musk's
again?
legendary move.
He lies on top of you?
He just sits on top of his opponents and hope that they can't get up. So we'll see. And as we know, Mr. Zuckerberg is into martial arts and jiu-jitsu.
Isn't he like a black belt or something? I think he's like accomplished, from what I understand.
Well, I don't know, but they talked about how he looked like he was decimated in a chokehold a couple of weeks ago. So we really don't know what's going on with these guys. But I guess when you run these companies, you have a lot of time, at least in Zuckerberg's case, to work on your physical self as well. Look at RFK, 69 years old.
Do you think that's real or that's an illusion?
I think it's steroids.
Do you really think it's steroids?
Yes.
Do you really?
You don't?
Well, I hadn't thought about it, but I think that's
He's
very
almost
possible.
70.
Yeah.
I would suspect that that's what's going on. But in any case, you haven't seen him. He had his shirt off, and he's lifting all these weights, and he's really very muscular for a man of his age. Anyway, we're talking about Threads, the new opportunity from Mark Zuckerberg as an alternative to Twitter. Are you sick of Twitter? Are you getting on Threads? Are you sick of them both? 877-301-8970 is the number. You can call us or tweet us at that number. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Keeping you informed throughout the day.
I'm Paris Alston.
And I'm Jeremy Siegel with the local stories we're following.
From the morning,
with the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro.
Through midday.
We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Hello, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie.
Evening.
From the GBH Newsroom, I'm Arun Roth.
And night.
I'm Mary Blake in our Boston studios.
Trusted local news from trusted voices. GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Direct Tire and Auto Service, committed to helping Boston drivers since 1974, performing regular maintenance to help improve performance and gas mileage. Direct Tire and Auto Service, not just service, customer service. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked among the best children's hospitals in the nation by U.S. News & World Report. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brody and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. In 41 minutes, the mayor will be here to spend an hour with us for Ask the Mayor. We'd like you to join us as well. Phone, text, come on down to the library, ask her a question or make comment in person. What you're tuning into is a special 1-hour pledge. For $10 a month or $120 all at once, you can win 2 tickets to the Musk-Zuckerberg cage match for a date to be determined. At least that's what Marjorie wants. But I am talking about Threads, a new social media app from Meta, owned by Zuckerberg. You're jumping ship on Musk's toxic Twitter to go there, or you're worried it'll just be the same old, another data-sucking app from a billionaire who's less interested in protecting free speech and privacy and democracy than he is about monetizing everything. Give us a call or a text. 877-301-8970 is the number.
You know, Hike from Boston makes a good point. He says, as much as I like to sink Elon Musk, I'm not sure Meta is much better. And Threads is explicitly going to de-incentivize news and politics posts, which is or was one of the main reasons to be on Twitter. I mean, you talk about this all the time, that you can get a lot of breaking news faster. And then,
it's the primary reason I do it.
And lots of people get their news almost thoroughly from Twitter. Other people, Phil from Amesbury has a question. What has using Twitter done to improve your lives? How about having neither? I think you would argue that you get your news really quickly from Twitter.
By the way, it's not just news from established sources. You often get, quote, news from people inside the news story, whether it's in Ukraine or wherever else it is. I mean, there's great value to it. At the same time, there's a great downside, obviously.
Someone else agrees with you, Jim. They signed up for Threads, don't have Twitter anymore, but they think the same problem. This is Bern in Connecticut. Desktop, being able to use Threads on desktop is critical. I won't be using it until then. But several people have mentioned this, and I think this is correct. Maybe you know, Jim, because I'm not sure.
What is it?
That if you get Threads and then you decide to delete it, your Instagram account goes with it.
I don't know about that.
Well, that's what a couple of people are saying.
I don't use Instagram, so I wouldn't
and
know.
They're very well. Didn't you have to get on Instagram to get on Threads?
I did, but I don't know if you end up losing both if that happens. So.
Well, Leah Needham is saying that once you open a Threads account, if you deleted it, then you're deleting all your Instagram activity, and this person, Leah Needham, does not want that to happen.
877-301-8970. What is this Threads thing doing for you? I mean, obviously, by definition, considering these signups, I hate to keep mentioning the same number, but 100 million people in a week is a lot of people. And as we said at the top of the show, the number everybody's been touting is how many people signed up for ChatGPT in its first week. I think it was in October or November, and it was not 100 million. This is a huge number, and I don't think it's because people love Mark Zuckerberg. I think it's because a lot of people want to get away from Elon Musk. You know what's interesting? I don't know if they've been able to figure this out yet, at least I haven't read it yet, is how many people who have moved to Threads or added Threads as an app have dumped Twitter as an app. Or maybe, I guess we could be able to know that, but I guess we wouldn't know who stopped tweeting. I mean, the mayor, we'll ask the mayor when she gets here. The mayor is tweeting a lot less, I think, on her personal account, she told us, if at all, on Twitter, and doing some on her Mayor Wu account.
Michael from Watertown is rooting for Zuckerberg, apparently, in the cage match. He points out that jiu-jitsu, properly practiced, is an extremely dangerous martial art, including throws, joint locks, chokeholds. Judo was created to have something similar with a lower injury rate. So Michael from Watertown appears to be predicting that.
Do you even know what jiu-jitsu is?
I have no idea.
Nor do I.
I have no idea. I know that Giselle Bundchen, post the divorce from Tom Brady, was supposedly dating a jiu-jitsu instructor.
She was?
Yes, at least 10 or 12 years younger than she is, but we don't know if that's actually true or that just was a something that you saw on Twitter, Jim, or in the Drudge Report.
Okay, once again, to sum up, I've been talking about the move to Threads, attempting to discuss it. Marjorie is talking about Giselle Bundchen and cage matches between two of the wealthiest men on the planet. 877-301-8970 is the number.
They're challenging each other to a physical confrontation.
I don't think it's happening.
Well, I don't think it's happening either.
It's like a high-profile
isn't
sort
this
of
kind of ridiculous? I mean, wouldn't you be a little concerned if your senator started doing this? Imagine if women politicians started doing this.
Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene basically did it when she called her the B word on the floor of the House of Representatives.
She got in a lot of trouble for it. Okay, and many people just think that neither of them is worth their time or their energy, and that their lives have not been improved one little bit.
Well, they're wrong. I'm sorry. They are wrong. I mean, again, every time we have this discussion about the value of Twitter, I know you read that tweet, a text, I'm sorry, about the guy saying, why don't you get off both? Twitter has real value, and I assume Threads is going to have comparable value.
One of the things Juliet Kaim always says, in a disaster like the rainfall we had
That's
yesterday,
another great example.
That you can get real news from people on the ground.
In real time.
And it is very important in terms of hurricanes or floods or that kind of thing. And obviously we all know the ill-fated, Arab Spring, which did not turn out as many people hoped. That was a Twitter thing too,
huge.
Was it not? And
well, actually, it was a Facebook thing. The guy organized the thing on Facebook.
A person from Cape Cod says that they've been watching Robert Kennedy Jr. and Arnold Schwarzenegger cage match for years on the Cape. We don't know who won those cage matches.
To do what you've been doing, which is distract away from the topic. Speaking of that, the Robert Kennedy thing, we're going to talk to John King after the mayor today. Robert Kennedy, he has, I think, more staying power than Ron DeSantis appears to have. Do you find that pretty surprising?
I think that's another momentary blip.
It's been a month or two.
It's been a month or two, but how many people have heard Robert Kennedy talk? It's very disturbing to listen to him talk. I think that's upsetting to people.
What do you mean, the quality of his voice? I don't think he's going to lose because of that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the quality of his voice and his ideas about vaccinations and some other things are very much out there. He's a conspiracy theorist.
He is a conspiracy theorist.
I think he was on Joe Rogan's show, kind of going on and on and on in a way that was very disturbing. And I mean, I'm not trying to poke fun at the guy. He's got a physical ailment that causes his voice.
He does.
But I think that is problematic to people. And I think that the 69-year-old muscle-bound thing is a little weird, too.
By the way, I want to agree with you. And in a similar vein, a 70-something-year-old serial sexual harasser and assaulter and accused of felon could never be in the lead of any party for his presidential nomination.
I think at least Trump has slowed down on the sexual assault thing lately, hasn't he?
How do you know?
We haven't heard any more claims, and we haven't seen Melania within a mile of him on any occasions? I mean,
we have not. She hasn't been in the courtrooms. We know that for sure. She's not been in the courtroom.
Okay, 877-301-8970, and the $100 million has nothing to do with Threads, says Art from West Bridgewater. It's totally a backlash against Musk by people with Trump and Musk derangement.
Well, whatever it is, it's 100 million people. We've got to take a break, Marjorie.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking with NBC Sports' Trenny Casey. The New York Times has eliminated its sports section, and a great young athlete who was eliminated from the Olympics last time around because of marijuana use after her mother's death is back and doing spectacularly well. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
Next time on The World, there are thousands of shrines and temples in Japan maintained by carpenters who join stone and wood without nails or screws. But these artisans are aging, and there's a push to train younger people in their craft. We visit workshops in Japan where traditional skills are kept alive. On The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Worcester Art Museum, presenting Watercolors Unboxed. Visitors can discover the vibrant beauty of 40 rarely seen works by Sargent, Homer, Modigliani, and more, now on view. More at worcesterart.org. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy, that's me, live from the library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us for an hour of Ask the Mayor at 12:06, right after the noon news. But joining us now at the library is Trenny Casey. Trenny's the anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a BPR contributor. Hi there, Trenny.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey, Trenny, let's start with the New York Times getting rid of its sports department. They're not laying anybody off. Apparently, they're going into other jobs. The New York Times bought The Athletic, that great online sports publication, a while back. And I guess this is what they're doing. They're transitioning to The Athletic and forgetting about sports in the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're forgetting about sports in the New York Times. I think they're just shifting how people consume it. I also think, and I didn't know this until I read the article, The Athletic has yet to have a year where it's been profitable.
Right.
So they have definitely saturated the market. They have beat reporters from, like the Boston Red Sox have 2 beat reporters. The New England Patriots, I think, have 2 guys that cover the Patriots
from the
Athletic pretty consistently. We do too, right? Like the Patriots are a big beat, but we only have one on the Red Sox, one on the Celtics. For our website. So they've got columnists, they've got national writers, they've got local writers. So it's a huge staff. So I think that this sort of just, I know it doesn't pare the staff down. They had about 20 layoffs, but I do wonder if linking it directly to where now New York Times subscribers can only get their sports news from The Athletic, it sort of drives people to that site, maybe helps them push up advertising and helps the website. I'm sure it's a way for them to try and make money. I am curious what happens now. I know they didn't lay anyone off who worked for the New York Times, but what got my antenna up is how long do they maybe start cutting until they start cutting more jobs at The Athletic, see things as redundant or not needed, and make it more of a national website. Because right now it's really localized. Like I follow the Packers and the Brewers and Marquette, and each of those has a writer on The Athletic that covers them.
But you know what's interesting about the Times part of this? By the way, don't take this. It's going to come off in a much more arrogant way than I intended.
It's okay, Jim.
The New York Times,
we know you,
intends to be doing exactly what we've done with Trenny and Trenny's done with us. We don't talk about how many hits Duran got last night, how many points did Jaylen Brown score last night. We don't do box scores. We do sort of the intersection of culture, real life, and sports, which I find wildly interesting. And that's what it sounds like the Times, not the Athletic portion of it, but the Times itself says it plans to continue covering sports in addition to the Athletic. But it's sort of like the cultural impact, because sports is a huge part of American and world life, you know?
Because some of the writers that they talked about in this piece who are being reassigned are still going to cover sports in a sense. Like one, I think, is going to cover the intersection of sports and business because it's become such a big business,
obviously,
right? I think there was someone else in there who would like sports and health. I will say this about The Athletic. They also are not a box score type website. Right? Like they don't do game stories. My friend Jen McCaffrey is one of the Red Sox reporters for The Athletic. She writes mostly features. Now, if there's something incredible that happens at a game, there's a no-hitter, a perfect game, something just, wild happens when you're at the ballpark, then they'll write more of a game story. But even the Patriots writers, they sort of dig beneath the surface. It's still more X's and O's and sports content than sports and, say, culture or business, but it's definitely more feature-like. As opposed to, I think, what you're used to typically reading when it comes to sports. Because now, let's be honest, if you're not watching the game on television or you're not streaming it, it doesn't take very long. Like when I get up in the morning and if I want to see how the Brewers did the night before, I go to my Major League Baseball app, I look at the Brewers, I look at the box score, and then I'm done. And if I want to read a story about it, I'll read a story about it. But you don't always need game recaps anymore.
Well, if you get this Sunday Times delivered, and I get the print edition on Sundays because I love all these different sections, the book review and the style section and stuff. There isn't even a separate section for the sports section now. It's contained within, I think it's in the front somewhere, maybe it's after national news or something. And it's like, what is it, 2 pages, if even that? I mean, the Globe sports section dwarfs it every single solitary day of the week by 3 or 4 times. So they obviously have not been exactly knocking their socks
But
off.
even look at the Globe. The Globe is, I would argue, one of the best sports pages, if not the best sports page in America. But look who the superstars are. Dan Shaughnessy doesn't do box score kind of stuff. He's a columnist. I don't know if he'd say features, but it's like a step back, think pieces about what's going on.
Bob Kohler, Chris
and that's
Gasper.
exactly all those people. And I find that really Ben Volen football. That's what I find to be really interesting. And you know what a good example, by the way, is? I know it's not a sports story, but it sort of speaks fitting into the culture. Obviously, starting a week ago Thursday, we talked a lot about affirmative action. In the interim, we've talked about legacy admissions. There's a terrific story in the Globe today by Hillary Burns that says, while we're all, these aren't her words, but while we're all focused on legacy admissions being affirmative action for rich white people, essentially, the issue that is skewing the student body at places like Harvard whiter is legacy, yes, but is athletics even more. And they talk about the fact, which was stunning to me. One, Harvard has more varsity sports than any college in America, which is incredible to me. And secondly, and this is counterintuitive to me, a ton of the sports are dominated by wealthier white students, like skiing, like sailing and crew and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Well, and so my husband actually brought this story originally to my attention because he had seen an opinion column on CNN yesterday that talked about this very thing, about how we're overlooking the athletic portion of affirmative action. And his response was, yeah, but for basketball and football, at least, that gives a lot of kids who are minorities an opportunity, kids of color, a chance to go to college. But I don't think what either of us thought about is how many other sports, so we see sometimes soccer, but usually basketball, football, and then maybe like soccer or hockey, right? And two of those are dominated by people of color. And the rest of a lot of the other sports that, you might play in college, whether it's rowing, I think, does Harvard have equestrian? It has tennis.
They have fencing.
Fencing.
Wow.
Golf. Those are all sports that are not just dominated by white people, but white wealthy people, right? So, I grew up in a middle-class suburb of Wisconsin. I certainly wasn't fencing or doing equestrian as a child. We couldn't have, I didn't even know what fencing was, but we certainly couldn't afford to go hang with horses. So not only does it skew, I think, who gets into these colleges in terms of race, but also socioeconomics, which really was brought to my attention this weekend. I had lunch with my friend's niece is going to BC. She's going on a full ride through this Jesuit scholarship program. Do you know how much they estimate between personal costs, room and board, and tuition at BC will cost a student?
80 grand.
90 grand a year.
Is it 90 grand
It's
now?
85 to 90 grand a year. Now, if you are a regular middle-class family, how do you afford that if your kid isn't like this young lady who is remarkable? She's in the school play and sports, perfect grade point average, and applies for this, has done a ton of service work, which allowed her to apply for this scholarship. If you don't get that, your other way in is athletics. But if the athletics are tipping the scales towards kids who can only have the money to play those high-end sports, then we're not erasing any of the inequities at the college level.
Yeah.
It's a deeper problem than just regular admissions.
Axios had an interesting piece today talking about how people are losing faith in college because they don't see the worth of spending all this money. And I think what's going to happen with colleges is what happens with a lot of business schools. It's not going to be worth it unless you get into the schools with a name like Boston College and that are wired. Because if you go to a school, a liberal arts college that no one has ever heard of that isn't wired, is it worth that kind of money? I don't know.
Well, and as we're talking about this, the other thing it makes me think of is about the varsity, was it the Varsity Blues? Was that what they called it? The Varsity Blues scandal. How many of those wealthy families put their kids in sports that they knew there weren't a lot of athletes in, and then paid for their kids to be accepted into schools.
Water
and the
polo.
Other thing,
had you ever? I never heard of water polo.
Well, water polo I've heard of because it's in the Summer Olympics.
That's the only reason I know about
it. But also the numbers of how only 1% of the kids who get into an Ivy League school like Harvard who are athletes, only 1% would be able to get in on their own volition. Only 1% of them have the test scores, the grades, all of the other things. So the exceptions made for these athletes are pretty high.
And they also go, in the same piece by Hillary Burns, at Harvard, between 2009 and 2014, the admission rate of athletes was 86%.
Right.
The admission rate of everybody else is 5.5%.
But you know what else?
Yeah.
You know what else it does explain? We talk often about parents' obsession with their kids in Little League and, junior high school sports and stuff. This is part of the reason why. Because
Wait, what do you mean? That gets you into
because it gets you into a good school.
You don't know. I mean, you probably, by the time the kid gets to high school, you may realize your kid is now a superstar. You may not. I mean, they may be a borderline case. But if you think you can get yourself into one of these great schools at less amount of money, because this was part of the affirmative action story, it is true, and probably not fair, that people that go on to lead the world, lead the country, lead businesses, come from a lot of these elite schools.
A lot of these elite schools.
Can I tell you, I said this at the time of affirmative action, then we can leave the topic. This woman taking over in September is going to be under colossal pressure, Claudine Gay, who's going to be running Harvard in September. Legacy admissions, this athletic stuff after this great reporting that is, despite what we all thought, it doesn't skew towards kids of color, it skews, at least at the elite schools, to white kids, further exacerbating the problem after the repeal of after the ruling on affirmative action.
I mean, places like Harvard don't make a lot of money, I would imagine, on football, because you don't think of them as a football powerhouse. But I bet what's going to happen to schools that do have powerful basketball teams and football teams, they're going to, like Boston College, they're going to go more toward those kids because those are the places where they make money.
Yes. I mean, I think you still
don't make money
decent,
off the fencing team.
No. I mean, really, all those teams are supported oftentimes
by
football and basketball teams, the money-making teams.
Okay, so let's talk about
which is a whole other issue.
Somebody who I greatly admire. Megan Rapinoe, the brilliant soccer star, announced she's retiring at the end of the season or some such thing. But we want to play a little bit of history where Megan Rapinoe intersected with the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. So here is first Rapinoe talking to an 8x8 reporter. This is back in 2019.
I'm not going to the fucking White House. No, I'm not going to the White House. We're not going to be invited.
You're not going to be invited?
I doubt it.
She says the first thing, she swallowed her words, I'm not going to the effing White House, she says. Now, you may like that or not like it. It's up to you. Trump's response on Twitter, he goes on and he says, I'm a big fan of the American women's soccer team, but Megan should, capital letters, win before she talks. Well, in her next match, here's a little play-by-play of Megan Rapinoe immediately after Trump's comments about maybe she should win. These are the two goals she scored against France.
No one and all the way in! A dream start for the United States. Possibilities here for the USA, and should be 2-0 and is. What a World Cup for Megan Rapinoe. She sweeps the ball past a helpless Sarah Buhari. France 0, USA 2.
A selfless Sarah Buhari from France. So that she scores the first two goals immediately after Trump baits her and says, well, maybe she should win before she worries about saying whatever she says.
And they won.
She's amazing. What's her one of the greats ever, right?
To me, her legacy is not just being a great athlete, but someone who was unafraid to take a stand.
Yeah, I totally
and I
agree
think,
with that.
and listen, this is, I know sometimes the stakes are higher in men's sports because the contracts are so much bigger. It's a different environment. But unlike a lot of big-time male athletes, she had no problem always speaking her mind, and she did it, and without losing sponsorships, and she also did it and still performed to the highest of levels. Because there are many athletes who may say something like what she did, like I'm not going, because the only way we should backtrack. The reason they would have been invited to the White House and why she was asked that is because they were playing in that at that time that World Cup. So they were asking her, if you win the World Cup, would you go to the White House? And she said, no bleeping way. And then she goes out and he, takes her to task. Former President Trump takes her to task on Twitter, and then she goes out and overperforms. So this is someone who, no matter the pressures that have been on her shoulders, the criticism she has faced, she has always walked the walk and talked the talk. Like, to me, she is one of the most impressive athletes of our generation.
Yeah, and you can imagine, I don't know how old she is. I assume she's 30s.
She's 38 years old.
Yeah.
So, and she's had this year, so she also plays in the National Women's Soccer League, which is the professional soccer league. She's missed some games in time recently with injury. It just happens. Like, soccer is pretty hard on your body. I mean, you think about it, you're running an average of 7 miles per game, they say, depending on where you are on the field. And so, yeah, she's just she's calming down. I think also, and correct me if I'm wrong, is she married to Sue Bird?
Yeah, she is.
And Sue Bird also recently retired. So I'm sure that
great
basketball player in the WNBA and at UConn. And I'm sure at some point, your priorities shift. You know
what I was going to say about Rapinoe retiring young, not young for the sport, but as a young person. Does she follow the path of someone like Billie Jean King, great tennis player who kept being an activist to this day? And you know what it reminded me of that we just totally forgot to put in the pile for you today? Did either of you read the incredibly beautiful story in the New York Times about Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova?
So I sort of skimmed it. I didn't read the whole thing, but it is a beautiful story.
This is a story. For those of a certain age, if you're too young, the two greatest women's tennis players of their time were Navratilova
it was like
and
the
Chris Evert.
Late 70s, early 80s,
I don't know what decade it was.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. But in any case, they're older women now, and in the intervening years, of which I was not aware of, they became really close friends. And I think when Navratilova was married, the maid of honor, whatever it's called, was Everett, and so that kind of thing. But the story is about how they're both cancer survivors now. And there's this incredibly beautiful black and white photograph at the head of the story with their eyes both closed, with their heads leaning against each other. That is so touching and so beautiful. And it's a long story about their whole career, their combat on the tennis court, their friendship, and then sort of the solidification, if that's a word, of their friendship around this cancer issue that they're both dealing with. It's just, people should read. It's a beautifully told story.
It's been on my list of things to read. I have no excuse, Jim. I have no excuse. I was going to make an excuse. I have no excuse.
No, but they're too. Well, we also should have added today. We forgot. But it is a beautiful story. Hope people will read it.
So let's get the update on Sha'Carri Richardson. She got in trouble for testing positive for marijuana after her mother died. I think she was going through a bad place. Great track star. But she's now won the 100 at the USA. Actually, we'll play the sound from her talking. She won the
100-meter dash in 10.89 seconds or 10.87 seconds, which actually wasn't even her fastest 100-meter dash of the weekend. She ran a 10.71 in heats and didn't need it in that.
And here's a piece of her post-race interview on NBC Sports after winning.
The thing I remember the most is the last time I think I stood here on this stadium with you, and I did an interview. When I knew I wasn't ready to do it. But now I stand here with you again, and I'm ready. Mentally, physically, and emotionally. And I'm here to stay. I'm not back, I'm better.
What is she, like 23 also?
I'm really
she's really
rooting
young.
for this young woman. I mean, I guess it's against the sports laws to do marijuana because it's illegal in a lot of places, or because you're not supposed to do any kind of drug, or what's the deal?
There doesn't seem to be any performance enhancing qualities to it. It's still outlawed by I think the U.S. Olympic Committee still outlaws it, as does the international governing body for track and field, international track and field. She had qualified to go to the Olympics, and then they pulled her, suspended her. She would have technically been able to return for the 4x1 relays, but Team USA said, no, we're not going to take you to Tokyo at all. So now she has a chance. She won nationals. She's the national champion in the 100 meter. She lost to Gabby Thomas in the 200 meter race, but she's one of the greatest sprinters, and there's been a lot of hype around her. And listen, she went through a tough time afterwards. There were some people who took her to task after she tested positive for using marijuana, said, listen, you know the rules, you can't be upset about it. And she sort of said some things on Twitter, and I think maybe made it harder on herself than she needed to. But in the intervening months, she's put her head down and she has trained, because I think we actually talked over the winter that she ran a race and didn't do very well either.
I do remember. She did very poorly, actually.
She did very poorly in an international meet, and we all were like, well, who knows what's going on with her? Is she ever going to reach peak form? And now she's really rounding into form as we're 1 year out from the Paris Games in 2024. So I think she'll be someone we're all watching this time next summer. Now, what else was cool? I don't know if you guys saw this, if you saw the video of her race. She always wears like this sort of like red wig. And for whatever reason, she took it off, probably because it was like a million degrees in Eugene, and she rips off the red wig, and then she has all these very cool braids in her hair, and she just flies out of the blocks. Like, she is so fast.
She doesn't ordinarily
powerful.
compete in a wig, does she?
She does sometimes, yes.
Doesn't that add like a heat issue?
That's heat, weight. I mean, to me, like if you're a runner, especially a sprinter, like that's why they wear just like the tiny little sports bras and the tiny little, like, basically they're just like underwear. They look like they're wearing a bikini because of the less drag of anything that you can have on you. I mean, it sounds insane, but if it's even 1/100th of a second, that could be the difference between winning and losing a title.
Okay, Larry Nassar, people may know he was the physician that was convicted of sexually abusing all these dozens and dozens of young female gymnasts, including Allie Raisman from Needham, who very courageously got up and spoke about him.
She's part of the reason he's in jail.
Yeah.
Big part.
These women were incredibly courageous. Simone Biles. Anyway, he was attacked in prison. What happened?
Yeah, he was stabbed a number of times, I believe 6 times in the heart and in the side. He is in stable condition. I was under the impression that he was in intensive or in isolation, solitary confinement. So I'm not sure if, like, you have a little bit of time where you come out. Thankfully, I do not fully understand the prison system. But I think this is part of why they do it, why they have him in isolation, is because not so much that he's a harm to himself, but what ends up happening a lot of times, I think, with high profile inmates, especially inmates who do something to children. They are like, that's the one thing I do know about the prison system. That is the scum of the criminal earth. And he did survive, but it'll be interesting to see how they handle his imprisonment and whatnot going
John
forward.
Gagan, the priest, was murdered in prison, remember?
Yeah.
And he was also convicted of actually indecent assault and battery.
But I'd imagine if you're a victim of him, to just even have his name be in the news again, like every time you hear his name again, even if it's something terrible that happens to him, it has to just be re-traumatizing for you, because then all of those stories are written and all of the background comes up again. And I think that's sometimes what we don't take into account, especially with sexual assault victims, is that they're the person who hurt them and ruined their lives. When we talk about it over and over and over again, that's reliving a trauma.
By the way, was that not the case, speaking of was that not the case where, was it the FBI in Indiana? Was it the Nassar case? Knew about this, did virtually nothing, at the same time that an FBI employee was applying for a job with the United States Olympic Committee.
And it's estimated that during that time the FBI did nothing. This physician, Nassar, abused 70 or more young athletes.
Right.
70.
Yeah.
I mean,
you mean subsequent to the time where they could have stopped
in other words,
right.
In other words, 70 young athletes would not have had to go through this had the FBI not done what it was supposed to do.
It's such a grotesque failure to protect our kids. Because these young women were just kids at the time. And they were just doing what adults told them to do. Go see this doctor, stay in this program. It's really sad.
So what I'm going to recommend to people is when you're feeling down and the state of the country is not what you want it to be in days gone by, read Donald Trump's tweet and then listen to Megan Rapinoe scoring 2 goals just days later. That'll lift
Remember,
your spirits.
we have a fight in us.
That's right.
Some of us do.
Trenny Casey,
Good to see
thank
you,
you very much.
Thanks so
Trenny
much.
Casey is an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a Boston Public Radio contributor. Up next, after the noon news, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu will be here for Ask the Mayor to take our questions and your questions.
More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and North Shore Music Theater, presenting The Sound of Music, a story about love, hope, and courage. Featuring the score by Rodgers and Hammerstein. The musical comes to the stage July 11th through the 23rd. nsmt.org. Amid America's polarized democracy and the scrutiny of the Supreme Court, Frontline investigates Republican Senator Mitch McConnell's rise and his role in transforming the High Court. Watch an all-new Frontline tonight at 10 on GBH2.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
Touching on revelations about President Biden's ignored 7th grandchild. Then a new piece in The Atlantic waxes poetic about the value of clutter. Have you had enough of the clutter around your house, or are you proudly filling your Amazon shopping cart today for Prime Day? Anti-clutter people be damned. All that and more ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden is meeting with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan this hour on the sidelines of the NATO summit in Lithuania. Turkey recently signaled it would drop its objection to Sweden's request to join NATO, a request made after Russia invaded Ukraine last year. Here's NPR's Asma Khalid.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters the U.S. had significant engagement in bringing this deal about and reiterated that NATO remains united.
Vladimir Putin has been counting on the West to crack, NATO to crack, the Transatlantic Alliance to crack. He has been disappointed at every turn. Vilnius will very much disappoint him.
In addition to the question of Sweden's membership, another big issue at this NATO summit is Ukraine's bid to join the alliance. Biden has said Ukraine is not ready to join, but the White House says allies could find some agreement on a pathway toward future membership, though it has not articulated a timeline. Biden is slated to meet with Ukraine's president tomorrow. Asma Khalid, NPR News, Vilnius.
In Iowa, lawmakers are considering a ban on abortion after an estimated 6 weeks of pregnancy. They're in special session today. Here's Iowa Public Radio's Grant Gerlach.
Lawmakers are taking up a so-called fetal heartbeat bill that would ban abortions after cardiac activity can be detected in an embryo. Providers say that's before most women know they're pregnant. Sarah Traxler is the chief medical officer of Planned Parenthood North Central States. She says if the proposal passes, they'll go to court.
We will do our best to challenge it. We will comply while it is in effect, but we will still provide abortion care in the state of Iowa up to what is legal.
A nearly identical heartbeat law passed in 2018 was struck down, but that was before the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. Republicans control both chambers of the Iowa legislature and the governor's office. They intend to pass the abortion ban in one day. For NPR News, I'm Grant Gerlach.
Small business owners are feeling more confident about the U.S. economy. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on a new survey that finds the most upbeat outlook in 7 months.
A survey by the National Federation of Independent Business finds owners feeling somewhat more upbeat about the economic outlook. Fewer business owners say they're having trouble getting credit. Owner short-term sales forecast has also improved. Researchers say Amazon's offering deeper discounts during this week's Prime Day promotion, a move that could give a boost to consumer spending. Last year, Amazon customers shelled out nearly $12 billion during the midsummer shopping spree. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Well, U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 233 points, more than 0.5%, at 34,178. The Nasdaq is up 50 points. The S&P's risen 20. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Henry Santoro. Today is a real test for traffic to and from Logan Airport. That's according to MassDOT. Many drivers are back in the city this week after the holiday to find the Sumner Tunnel closed. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey says repairs are going smoothly, but there have been some backups from traffic displaced by the closure in the Ted Williams Tunnel. Local shuttles are accounting for that. Dean Athanas says his company, Green Shuttle of Cape Cod, has made plans with customers to build in extra time.
We're advising them both inbound and outbound. We're adjusting the pickup times by at least 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. We're also giving the customers a heads up that if they want to be picked up earlier than that, that's fine with us.
The Sumner is expected to be closed until August 31st. Sounds like a lifetime away. Ever since Massachusetts started allowing undocumented immigrants who live in the state to get their driver's licenses, the number of learner's permits that have been issued has doubled from the same time last year. According to the Registry of Motor Vehicles, 2,800 learner's permits have been issued so far this month, and the RMV expects many more will be issued now that the 4th of July holiday is over. To handle the increase in customers, the RMV has extended its hours, open now from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, and with 7 locations now open on Saturdays for license-related matters. 79 degrees outside our studios. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of any size to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one place. More at Indeed.com/NPR.
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do every Tuesday and every Friday. We are streaming online at Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're joined now at the Boston Public Library for the next hour by Boston's Mayor Michelle Wu. The mayor is here for the next hour taking our questions, your calls, and if you're with us in the audience of the library, you can ask her a question yourself. Just find one of our colleagues. Nicole is right there. Hello, Nicole. You can walk over to her, and maybe even, and Shay, I think, is working with her too, wherever Shay is, but she's somewhere here, and ask question directly to the mayor. Mayor Wu, it's good to see you.
Nice to be back.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's so luxurious. It's all upgrade. I feel like I need to bring a bunch of papers and spread them all out also.
That's right.
It only took us about 5 years to get that, too. It's amazing how quickly we worked.
We were criticized for having people being too low, and we were too high. So we decided
that was
to
on
raise
purpose,
everybody
right?
up.
Maybe it was.
Sit in the squishy chair.
That's right.
What is this, if I may ask?
So these are treats from a bakery. Oh, no. Tell me the bakery. Caramello on Blue Hill Ave. They are along the route for this weekend's Open Streets program. So there's a tres leches and a flan for you to. Okay, dibs.
I think we know what she's getting.
Favorite. That is the best thing
I love flans.
in the world.
That's
Thank you very much. Oh my God.
What's the name of the place again?
Great.
One more time.
Thank you very much.
Caramello. So the idea is that the streets will be shut down to vehicle traffic, and you can scooter, walk, dance, check out all the small businesses, many of them who will be spilling out onto the street as well. It's a fun time, and this weekend is Blue Hill Ave.
And Newbury remains a Sunday event,
That's
correct?
right.
Every
Yep.
Sunday.
Okay. That is really good. I just had a bite, so that's one of my favorite desserts of all time. Okay, so before we get to the, nitty-gritty of city government here, this is a great story I thought about. I saw it on Boston.com. Our staff gave it to us that New England has 2 of the best summer outdoor movie events in America, and one of them is right here in Boston. And I was embarrassed to say, I knew they did movies a while ago down at the Boston Harbor Hotel, but is that where they're talking about it, or is it something different?
It's rotating all around the city, actually. Our Parks Department not only keeps the grass beautiful and maintains the playgrounds, but they actually put a lot of effort to creating programming in our treasured public spaces as well. So starting in August, we will have 2 months of free movie nights rotating around the city. They're kind of, they're more family movies, Spider-Man, and this and that, and all different movies, all different locations. So you can check the city's website, and thanks to the incredible folks at the Parks Department for keeping that going.
That is a neat thing. That is something you will remember. I remember watching movies outside when I was a little kid in the backyard. It was like a big thrill. You remember it your whole life. That's neat.
So to the serious business, not that that's not serious business, entertaining people and keeping them outside. A story broke yesterday. Wu administration, says the Globe, will offer tax breaks to turn office buildings into housing. A day after a wonderful story by our colleague Shirley Leung about what happened in the Wall Street area in New York City. It used to be abandoned from 5 p.m. and weekends, and it's now this bustling thing. Could you briefly describe for people who didn't follow the news in the last 24 hours, what are you proposing and what do you think the prospects for this are?
The idea is that, if you ask any person off the street or kid to draw a picture of a city, they might draw those skyscrapers, big buildings, a downtown area where businesses are, but more and more, that's not necessarily sustainable for cities in a receding pandemic economy where people are zooming in for work. Many of those office buildings are more and more empty. We need every part of the city, including downtown, to be a thriving residential sector, and having people, foot traffic, for safety, for the small businesses to thrive is really important. So what New York saw success with was converting some of the office buildings to residential. It's a cumbersome process, and often the newest office buildings might not be totally appropriate because you don't necessarily have a lot of windows in the interior space and the plumbing's not quite right. But some of the older buildings in Boston, for example, that do currently have office space downtown might be appropriate. So even just a small number of these Class B, Class C older buildings with floor plates that are more susceptible to working for a residential layout. If we can help them with tax incentives, just get that conversion going, one building could potentially create hundreds of new housing units that could include a lot of affordable units, green requirements, and so we're designing a program that will launch this fall to encourage those property owners or developers to think about it and think if we can partner on making that happen.
Do you have a goal in terms of number of conversions you're hoping for and
Yeah,
what kind of time frame?
So I really want to just set expectations because every developer I've spoken to can immediately name the top 10 reasons why this is very, very hard. And in some ways, unfortunately, to make the finances work, the tremendous cost to redo all the plumbing and all of that, the property value of the commercial building has to have sunk pretty low, that they're getting desperate of how this could function. And so this is almost a mechanism where we can both save and rescue some buildings that are on the verge of falling off the tax rolls permanently because of changes in the economy, and reinfusing residential. So even if we got 2 or 3 buildings downtown with a couple hundred units each, that would be a significant step to revitalizing and getting people.
And a couple more details, and then we'll move on. Affordability requirements are built into this, right?
Okay. So when I was on the council, I had proposed a whole set of considerations for tax breaks, and those were derived from best practices nationally, where every time you are trading off the ability to collect taxes later on, even if it's necessary to make something work now that's very important for everyone, you are giving up public resources, and that trade-off has to be a very intense calculation. And so at the very minimum, as we're requiring the new conversion to satisfy our 20% affordable requirements, satisfy climate efficiency requirements, we would also include clawback provisions so that if anything along the way doesn't end up aligning with the expectations, then that tax deal, the kind of incentive program, reverts back to how it was before.
And I assume there's a zoning component, without getting lost in the weeds, that you're confident is going to happen, or no?
Yeah, I mean, many of we're in the process of working through a planned downtown process that has lasted many years at this point. And as we begin to think through the changes of what a downtown means in any city, opening it up so that these conversions from office to residential in our downtowns, but also, if you think about neighborhood Main Streets corridors, there might be some buildings that used to house law offices on the 2nd or 3rd floor that actually we want to make it easier for them to convert as well. Every little bit helps in our housing crisis.
One last thing about this, and by the way, I should have given the number a few times. It's 877-301-8970 if you want to call the mayor, if you want to text the mayor, 877-301-8970. I don't know why we asked this question, but maybe this discussion is being had before you made your announcement. Last month when the governor was here, we asked her about whether she'd support such an effort downtown. And she said something like, everything should be on the table. Is there an active discussion with the state about them making a contribution to make this more likely to happen in a serious way?
Yeah, I think at this point, the goal is really to say, let's get out of the general idea and down to, if we can identify 1 building, 2 buildings that can be the template, then we really get into the nitty-gritty of what does the financing look like? How much would it actually cost to convert? Do we need to move elevators? Is it about just installing more windows? And then layering the financing is something that we can pull on state and hopefully federal resources as well.
Has she pretty much said to you that there'll be money there? We want to work with you on this?
The governor and lieutenant governor have been incredible. I mean, they are right there with us on our efforts to convert to housing, to add more housing and make it affordable.
So one last thing before we get to the text and the calls, and the number again, 877-301-8970. Last time you were here, we've talked to you actually a lot about home rule, the idea that you have to go up to the legislature to get things done in Boston, like a rent stabilization program. Jim,
I know. I feel like I should have brought that and printed it so I could ask you about it.
Well, Jim is too humble to talk about his brilliant piece in the Globe on Saturday, talking about home rule and rent stabilization and your efforts to get rent control, rent stabilization, whatever you want to call it, into Boston because of the terrible increases in rent. So I just wonder, is there any updates, if you heard anything more on this front?
I mean, I would ask Jim on this front if we've gotten egged or anything like that. On our front, it's been very positive to just get a wider recognition that many of the things that are most important to our residents, housing prices, wages, the ability to ban fossil fuels and move in that completely green direction. So much of this, at this moment, the way our government is structured here in Massachusetts uniquely, does require leaning on the state legislature. And they've been great partners, but they have their own set of issues that they're working through, finishing the budget and other statewide issues. And so we try to raise our hand and get that attention wherever we can. But there are many issues that in other cities they would be able to act on totally on their own that we have to be in close coordination with.
So you're essentially where you were last month. You haven't gotten a no. Is that a
Yeah.
fair?
They're very busy right now finishing
Okay.
the budget, and so I will resume my gentle door knocking after that.
Let's go to Lorraine in Brighton. You're on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome, Lorraine. Thanks for the call.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
I know you're doing good. I hope you're also doing well. I live in what seems to be a forgotten section of Brighton. When I stand on my back steps, I see the Welcome to Brookline sign. So I'm really on the edge of Brookline. There are a lot of roads that switch back and forth between Brighton and Brookline. And it's almost as if Brighton thinks they belong to Brookline, Brookline thinks they belong to Boston, but nobody seems to be taking care of them. Many roads are in really tremendous disrepair. Potholes and cracks and just generally in bad shape. The Cleveland Circle terminus of the Sea Line, the parking there is in desperate need of restriping. Cars park all over the place.
Hey, Lorraine,
Yeah.
Lorraine, you're doing a wonderful job, but I assume the question at the end of the line is, what are you going to do about it? Is that where you're going?
Yes, that's exactly where
let's
I'm going.
find out.
Thanks for the help, Jeff. Yeah.
Thank you,
My
Lorraine.
pleasure.
I'm taking
Thanks.
notes. I'm getting my list so we can follow up on all of it. And if it's possible for Lorraine to stay on the line just so we can
Please.
get her street as well, so we can take a look. But
Don't hang
this
up,
is-
Lorraine.
I'm in my element of being able to say, okay, let's figure out where we can attack some of these potholes. The parking restriping, if you're talking about the MBTA section, it might be a little complicated with T jurisdiction as well, but this is what we do, and even in the areas where it requires a little coordination from our fellow municipalities, we're very eager to reach out to them and make sure we can be on the same page. So we'll follow up.
Lorraine, don't go away. We'll take your contact information and give it to the mayor's office.
There's been a lot of talk about in the Boston public school system about receivership, and I know you don't like that idea. There was another editorial in the Globe and stories in the Globe about this blistering from the head of the Department of Elementary Education around here, Jeff Riley, saying that schools haven't kept up. In the context of that, we've gotten a couple of texts about the story. I'm sure you saw Deanna Pan. We had her on the radio with us, and the student that was the center of this.
Justice for
the funding of
the Burke.
The Burke, which is really had almost next to nothing going on, versus Boston Lat, which seemed to have everything going on. So it's a two-part question, I guess. How worried are you about this chastising from Riley, and why did that happen with the Burke?
Yeah. So in terms of the relationship with the state and the I wasn't at the meeting, but read some of the coverage of the comments. It's really unfortunate, and I may just show up at the next meeting myself to make sure that we can be on the same page, because the communication between the district, between Boston, BPS, and the state's staff has been ongoing, regular, very pleasant. We're making tremendous progress on just about every one of the items that are included in that, what's called the school improvement list, the SIP, the improvement plan. And I've always said from the beginning, that document is the very lowest of baselines for our district. Compliance with making sure that bathrooms are safe and clean and functional, and that our data is audited, and all the things that we have done. That doesn't make for a district that we are proud of. We are working to go so far above and beyond that. And so it's a little bit frustrating, because I know that the tenor of those conversations in our working relationship day to day at the staff level with the state has been very productive. And we are meeting the vast majority of those deadlines and metrics. The ones that the commissioner has chosen to elevate himself separately with a very different tone than the rest of his team, in fact, are not even accurate when it comes to how they've been conveyed, right? There's this hyper-focus on on-time performance from buses, which I agree, as a parent and as someone who has experienced what it's like to put a child you're responsible for on a bus and then hear that they didn't get there for an extra 20 minutes and every day they have to miss math class, it is something that would cause you to think about trying to find another option. But when you look at the numbers and say, we need to hit 95% on-time rate, however, we are going to make you count as a 0 every bus that malfunctioned with its GPS that day, regardless of what time it actually got there, instead of just removing that data and not having it be counted and just use the good data. We are basically at 95% with the measurable data. But these other pieces where no other district around the country has to include dropped routes because of GPS technology malfunctions as a 0 in their system, it is meant, I believe, to create this sense of accountability and pressure, and I understand where, the commissioner has kids in the system as well. He wants to see Boston thrive and survive. We have a very different idea of what it means to work together and to have a productive relationship. And I think it's time that we get the chance at the city level to really show all of the metrics on that document. We will make our case, and then we are also moving so far ahead on some of the other issues that are not even covered by that in fact are what will make this district one that we're truly proud of.
So what do you think is going on? I have to say, to hear you say your description of where you stand and to hear Commissioner Riley's,
very different.
It's like they're talking about two different systems. What's the agenda, do you think, on Riley's part?
I mean, some of us have to run the system. Some of us have to show that they are watching over the system. But
you don't think he's doing it fairly?
Outside pressure is always helpful. I will never say that we want less accountability from any entity. I will say very forcefully that we are seeing our district more stable and making more progress now than we have in over a decade. I will firmly point to that in terms of retention of school leaders and teachers, the interest in staffing, to the number of applications we're receiving, the success that we're seeing with student engagement and many of these systems. We are dealing with many, many challenges that we've inherited over a long time, and some of that has been turnover in leadership, a very destabilizing situation where the superintendent was I believe the 6th in a 9-year period or something crazy like that. And so it's going to take a while. Many of our plans around reforming special education, which are tied to transportation and tied to quality and academic rigor or facilities, we have 3 to 5 year timelines to basically complete an arc that is going to get at the deep systemic issues. We want to see progress every single month, every single school year, absolutely. But there's a little bit of a disconnect, I believe, with how we are working together most of the time with the state and then what gets elevated.
But one last thing, if he's creating, these are in your words, but mine, based on what you're saying, a bit of a false narrative, does that not make your job harder with parents and teachers and everybody else?
I think some people don't care about that. And some people, they have to do their job in the way that they think they need to do their job. And we have to do that despite that. And frankly, I hear that from so many of the schools. I've visited the Burke many times. And when I hear from those students, there have been situations where I've been there just to talk with the young people and get their opinions. And then there have been situations where we were responding to something that was very unfortunate that happened there, for example. And in each of those instances, what I hear from our young people is we get talked about as if we are, not here and that we're not succeeding and nobody believes in us. They will say there's so much good happening in our schools. Our teachers are working hard every day. We are, in that case at the Burke, championship sports teams that are bringing the school community together statewide. And they deserve to have that full narrative and context presented. Of course we need to do better. I am not happy with the range of offerings that we give out at many of our schools. They need more. Every high school needs to have a full set of sports to choose from and academics and supports, and that's on us to create the resources so that it's not only the schools who can fundraise multiple million-dollar foundations
that's
to be
the
able
thing.
to resource that.
I mean, that is the thing that the story pointed out, and I probably should have pointed that out too, that one of the things about Boston Latin is they have, and I saw this in Brookline where my kids went to school, you have very rich family members who can donate lots of things to the school and fundraise in a very effective way. So you might get much better computers or a much better art thing or whatever. That is going on at Boston Latin is not necessarily going on at other high schools, and that does make a big difference, I think.
Yes, it makes a big difference right now with the current setup, and so much of the additional support and resources that are able to be funded on the outside, we're grateful and eager for every school community to be able to contribute and volunteer however they can, but there needs to be a sense that the district will guarantee the basics that every child deserves, and that level of basics needs to be raised up.
One more school-related thing. We have somebody has a question about the teachers who's right there. Aaron is your name, I believe? Yes. Aaron, wearing a Boston Teachers Union Local 66 shirt. I just saw it. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Jim. And Marjorie, I'm a big fan. I listen to your podcast every day.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
And Madam Mayor, so nice to see you and
nice
to be able to ask this question. I've been teaching in the Boston Public Schools for a good 12 years now. My colleague in the audience, even longer than I. We have negotiations coming up for a new contract, a successor contract, and as you well know, the previous round was less than ideal in its slow pace. Boston Public Schools arguably engaged in bad faith bargaining. I don't believe any legal charges were filed, but many, many, many bargaining sessions were canceled on us. Calls not returned, foot dragging. It was incredibly frustrating. We ended up getting what I would say is a decent contract in the end, but it took so long. Almost the entire thing was retroactive.
Mm-hmm. So what's your
and
question,
now
Aaron?
We're at it again. And my question is, Mayor Wu, do you pledge to make the next round more efficient and more productive?
Aaron, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. That has been, so yes, absolutely, that has been the goal, is that we should never have contracts lapse for our city workers. An active contract means that you are getting the regular cost of living increases to try to match, the pace of inflation and everything that's happening when workers, especially over covering this last period, which included the pandemic, people worked through that without any increases at all because the contracts were expired. I believe the BTU contract was a June 2020 expiration last time around, and so by the time we had, I could be wrong, but I think it was 2020 or 2021, and so by the time that I came in to office, it had already been lapsed for a significant amount of time. I think you'll recall that when our administration started, all 48 some of the city's municipal bargaining units were expired. That has never happened before, ever. They're usually, just for the general public's knowledge, they're usually about 3-year contracts, and they're kind of rolling and on a, staggered, so that you're negotiating a batch of these every year on an ongoing basis. So we came in with a lot, and the teachers union is one of our largest, is the largest contract. And so along with public safety, you represent so many members. There are many issues that were related to the pandemic, especially in terms of working nonstop. So we had a lot of complexities to address there. And I want to thank you all, because where we ended up, I believe, is landmark. It was just groundbreaking in terms of the investments that we're able to make together now in reforming special education, in thinking about English language learners, in addressing many of the disparities around paid leave and other portions. You all came to the table not just demanding salary increases that you were owed, but really with a whole very, very long list of things that our young people needed. And that's what the entire contract negotiations were centered around. So we are still now almost done with getting up to speed from having no active contracts. We're just needing public safety to be the final ones for this first round, but we know we have to be back at it, and whatever we can do. We've also built out our staff a lot more since then in terms of the Office of Labor Relations, and hopefully it will be a different experience on all sides this time around, and you have my word that I will stay updated so I can jump in if needed.
By the way, we're going to get to the police contract later, but speaking of young people, is the deadline still in the future for summer jobs for kids?
Yes, this week is really, we want to make this the big push to remind young people, there can be some conversations if you really need to have more time to fill it out and then start late in the summer jobs program, but to be able to start on time with all your paperwork in, this is the week to get enrolled, finish all the processes and all that. There's some really great options out there. More than 7,000 roles that have been created across city departments, across private industry. And so we want everyone to sign up for that Success Link program. These are paid summer jobs. And if you know any young person who needs an opportunity, please tell them to
Where do
get
they
involved.
go? Where do they go?
City website.
City website.
Success Link.
Great.
As long as you mentioned the police contract, I know we talked to you a lot about needed police reform in Boston and your hope that you could avoid arbitration. I think that's what you said before. Now it seems like you're heading into arbitration. One of the things you talked about is changing the disciplinary system where officers who've been fired for pretty egregious conduct can get rehired, or when where officers get paid for working multiple police details at once. I mean, they're claiming to be due to 2 details at once, that kind of thing. Is this still possible? Because arbitration usually winds up helping the police and not the city.
Yeah, we are firmly in arbitration now, but have made some progress in terms of really narrowing the scope of which issues the department and the police union are kind of most interested in and most attached to. We are hoping that this will lead to a different outcome than usual, even through arbitration, because traditionally arbitration has just been used to decide between 2 different financial positions. Mm-hmm. The city wants to increase the salary by this much, the union wants to increase it by that much, and then there's some set of research and that the arbitrators do to decide to pick somewhere. There's actually, if you look at the legal language and all that, there's actually the ability to bring 5 separate issues that are not related to salaries into the conversation for arbitration as well. So our hope is to use all of those slots around overtime reform, around medical leave, around discipline and the role that arbitration plays in discipline for certain types of offenses, and to put that on the table as well, so that even some of the operational reforms that are needed, we will get into the same conversation.
Before we take a break, it seemed if I understand the process, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if ultimately the arbitration award is not what the city is happy with, the city council retains the ability to not approve the funding.
That's right.
Does the credibility of that position, assuming it comes to that, and I assume everybody hopes it doesn't, is the credibility damaged by the damage that some members of the city council have done to themselves, and maybe in turn, whether it's the whole, well, everybody knows what the issues have been of late, an ethics situation in one case, the driving situation with a suspended license, no registration in another. Does that not hurt the credibility of the body that may be the backstop on this pretty important issue?
I mean, to be honest, I think it hurts credibility on every issue. I will never hold myself up to be someone who is perfectly balancing everything that needs to be done and never making mistakes. I think in some ways we need our elected officials and those in office to really understand the full range of what our residents are going through. So I would never want to say that there needs to be a standard of perfection for behavior. At the same time, I hear from a lot of residents that there's great concern right now. It's just the kind of the density of, the frequency of different headlines that have been out there. And, all of us are on the ballot. That is the highest form of accountability for all elected officials. There's an election coming up in 2 months here in the city of Boston at the city level. But do I believe that our members, regardless of what's happening in the media and in other places, that they are tasked to eventually, hopefully, when this comes back, take a vote to assess the affordability of a package? That was the job before them, and that is the vote that they'll have to take.
We should just point out for people who don't know, Kendra Lara has apologized for allegedly driving on a revoked license, an uninsured, unregistered car, and not putting a 7-year-old son in the back seat without a booster seat. And Counselor Ricardo Arroyo, paid $3,000 civil penalty for violating conflict of interest law by representing his brother in a civil lawsuit involving a harassment case. So those
and
are
continuing the representation after he was
so those are the two cases involved. Before we go to the break, as long as we're talking about upsetting things, you, Mayor, seem to be particularly upset. I think maybe I was reading things in that wasn't there about this very tragic case in South Boston, the Mary Ellen McCormick housing development on the water there, that a trans woman was found dead in this apartment, and there were children in the apartment, and there were 51As filed by, I believe, both the firefighters and the cops. There seemed to be different versions of what happened, and you weighed in. So before we take the break, am I wrong? You seem to be pretty upset about the reporting on this story.
I think my main concern was, so just to review for some who might not have been following closely, there were concerns that there were conflicting reports of what had happened on the scene from different agencies who were involved, and there was a lot of conversation about this, even in international media, that frankly, if you read some of it, tended to lean into pretty damaging and harmful stereotypes about trans community members. And my view is this, that I think, one, it is important to separate out what each of our first responder agencies are there to do and what was officially documented versus what started spinning off into rumors and more in the coverage. Each of our agencies have a role to play, and they each arrived at different times. EMS and fire were on the scene first. They documented what they saw. They worked hard to try to resuscitate someone who was unconscious, and unfortunately were not able to. When that designation was made that resuscitation was not possible, Boston police were called to the scene to begin the death investigation, and they're continuing to coordinate with the medical examiner and others. And BPD's job, the police's job, is also then to assess the safety of everyone on site, including children, including others. They had an account that was read to be slightly different, although it was pretty close if you look at the reports to what was filed by the fire department. What it has, I think, upset me most of all is that in this conversation about was there illegal behavior, should children have been there, was this or that happening, misgendering of our residents, what has gotten lost is that there was a horrible tragedy that happened. A family is grieving now, and the people in that space, regardless of what might have been happening in and around or before, they needed to call 911 to try to get help. They did, and any of our residents in any situation, no matter how clean or messy your house is at that moment, no matter what was happening before, if someone needs help, call 911. That is what we are here for. And we are supposed to handle those situations with the utmost discretion, sensitivity, and training that is trauma-informed for reacting when residents are in the most horrific situations in their lives. And so there's been so much focus on the young people. Some sources even reveal their names and all sorts of speculation. The reason why it's important for us to document things officially, protect that information, and have that discretion is so that people's lives aren't upended when they happen to be already in crisis. And so that, I think, is most of all. There were rumors about whether there was hoarding and this and that. I saw the pictures. It was nowhere near what was being described. And a lot of that was not what the report said. It was just additional voices weighing in that frankly didn't need to. And I hope all of us have learned a lesson about letting our agencies do their jobs, document the facts. Of course, we need transparency and to know that they're being held accountable, but it's really important to have sensitivity for our residents' lives and to have privacy and not to just be putting everything out there when you're calling 911.
That was the voice of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. She's going to stick with us to the top of the hour, taking our questions and yours. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. The number's 877-301-8970. We are at the Boston Public Library.
This is what collaborative journalism looks like.
We are listening to you. We want to know from you what stories are important to you that we should be telling. My joke with people is they say, well, what do you want to know about? I said, I want to know about everything so I can decide which things I must pay attention to. Because the things I never hear about are the things I know I can't write.
Trusted local news with NPR, GBH 89.7.
Absolutely happy to hear from anybody.
What matters to you.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Newbury Court, a full-service residential community in Concord, Massachusetts for persons 62 or over, committed to creating an active, independent lifestyle. More at newburycourt.org or 978-369-5155. And South Coast Artists, presenting their 20th annual Open Studio Tour July 15th and 16th in Tiverton and Little Compton, Rhode Island, and Dartmouth and Westport, Massachusetts. You can download the tour brochure at southcoastartists.org. And Gloucester Stage, presenting Stew by Zora Howard, Pulitzer Prize finalist for drama. 3 generations of Black women bond as they gather to cook and honor an anniversary together. Now through July 23rd. GloucesterStage.com. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked among the best children's hospitals in the nation by U.S. News and World Report. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We're joined by the mayor for an hour of Ask the Mayor. We've got a little less than a half hour to go. If you want to contact her, and by the way, we're streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. If you're not at the library and want to contact her, the way to do it by phone or text is 877-301-8970.
You know, I know you can't go into details. This is one of those embargoed stories, but nonetheless, $6.9 million in cultural investment grants. What can you tell us about this?
So we're making an announcement later today to highlight several incredible organizations who are receiving significant support through the federal recovery funds and other programming with the city. The idea is that we need to make a big investment in arts and culture as critical infrastructure. There, sometimes you think about art and you think about something that's hanging in a museum, and that is so important that Boston has world-renowned cultural institutions that bring jobs, bring activity, and contribute to that global conversation. But many of these organizations are also using art as a vehicle for housing stability or creating jobs or de-escalating conflict in community. And so we're looking to highlight and provide that stability for the organizations so that we can see more art throughout our neighborhoods and see that connected to the daily lives of our residents.
So on the evening news tonight, we'll know who got what.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, in a little bit. I think I'm going there next.
1:30,
okay.
I think. Kendall and Roslindale, you're next with the mayor of the city of Boston. Hey, Kendall.
I'm not Kendall, I'm Kendra.
Kendra.
Sorry.
Let's blame that on somebody else. Hi, Kendra. It's really nice to have you. I'm kidding. Kendra, nice to have you. What's up?
Thanks for, I live in Roslindale, and getting to Forest Hills, down Washington Avenue, or along the J-Way in front of Faulkner Hospital is a nightmare because the rotary by the Arnold Arboretum has been reduced to 1 lane and because of bike lanes. And the bike lane there, I've never seen a bike on it. And it seems like some of the busiest streets are reducing lanes for bike lanes where it's really dangerous. Why not put the bike lanes in secondary streets or through the neighborhoods?
And Kendra, can you just tell me what time of day are you generally talking about, or is it kind of constant?
It's pretty much all the time, but I can't get from Roslindale to Jamaica Plain in less than 15 minutes because of that roundabout.
Okay. All right. I will, well, first of all, thank you for calling in. As you know, this area is one that I know very familiar with myself. We probably go down Washington Street, I don't know, a couple times a day even. I don't go as much down the other way around the Arboretum Rotary, but I will make sure that we check out the traffic flows just to be sure. I will say, though, that sometimes what can seem like a new bike lane associated with traffic is actually just cars coming back as people are getting back to where they were before. I'll just remind everyone that pre-pandemic, Boston was ranked the worst for rush hour traffic of any city across the country. Not even LA was worse than us. And we are seeing that come back. The only way to fix that in a city where we don't have extra land lying around everywhere to be able to build new roads, which wouldn't even work anyway, is to provide more options for people to move other ways, move more people down the same space that we have on our streets, fix the T, make sure that other ways of getting around are safe. And many of the bike lanes that, I'll have to look at this one in particular, but many of them, in fact, were not car lanes anyway. They had been parking before, and so most of the time when we're making decisions like this, it is really about keeping traffic moving, and it's not a direct trade-off between a bike lane slowing down traffic, and usually it's something else like parking or some other snag or needing to time the traffic lights better together. So we can look to see if there's a way to deep dive in this area and think about it. But just in general, you will see more bike lanes around the city. We have to find ways for people to get around because it's already not working in a lot of places. And so the more that we can create other options, the more that we can even just give a small percentage of people another way to get around, the less traffic there will be for everyone.
Kendra, why don't you stay on hold and we'll get your contact information so the mayor's office can be in touch.
Number
Thanks
one,
for the call.
I've seen a lot of bike people there because they're riding to the Arboretum. They're riding their bikes to the Arboretum. But number two, I think we have to face facts here. There's a terrible hostility between drivers and bicycles, all over the city. And the classic case in point is West Roxbury's Center Street. We have several people texting about that on either sides of the issue. Very unsafe street, a lot of accidents there. And but there's an uproar there, despite all these accidents and the trouble there with trying to reconfigure Center Street in West Roxbury. But you're going to go ahead and do that, I think.
Yeah, we have here, as we see in a lot of different issues and places around the city, everyone agrees that something has to be done and that there is a problem. But where we aren't necessarily all on the same page yet is whether this change or that one will actually solve it, and if this change or that one would then create unintended consequences. So I don't know if folks are familiar, but Center Street in West Roxbury is 2 lanes in either direction. It's a very cozy neighborhood business district, so many amazing restaurants and an art studio, lawyer's office, lots of stuff to do on either end. But crossing the street, I've been saying, because we're in the area a lot, and it's one of those situations where if you're there with your kids, that is a place where I will not hold their hands, because when you're so afraid that they might pull their hand away, that you insist on holding their wrists so you can keep tight all the time, that is crossing that street. There are cars everywhere, and because it's 2 lanes in either direction, even if the lane of traffic closest to you when you first step into the crosswalk sees you and stops, then the second vehicle next to them won't necessarily see you. And that's where we've seen crash after crash, multiple fatalities on that stretch, injuries just about all down that corridor. And so we're proposing a change that would make it 3 lanes, basically a lane of traffic on either side, a center turning lane, to make it safer so that we don't have that kind of conflict anymore. It would also have a bike lane as well with the extra space that is created. This is about safety for pedestrians of all generations, to stop the horrific injuries that people have been experiencing there, from a senior who was struck and killed on the street several years ago at this point, to a kindergartner whose foot was run over crossing the street a few months ago. This is, we have to do something, and we have gotten a lot of feedback that we're still incorporating from residents into how to manage the curbside space and make it work for all the businesses. But this is a change that needs to happen.
One last transportation thing before we go to, everybody knows they're installing bike lanes in the Sumner Tunnel now as we speak. Today, nobody works on Monday anymore. That was a joke for those who are upset about that. Tuesday's like the first real work day of the week these days. How did this morning go on the Sumner front, do you know?
I did not get a report back on specific numbers, but that's probably a good thing.
Okay, let's go to Michael and staying in JP. You're on Boston Public Radio with the mayor. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Mayor. This is Michael and JP.
Hello, Michael.
Keep up the great work. My question
housing question, I'm guessing.
You guessed right. You guessed right. What we're hearing at the State House is that the leadership of both the House and Senate are set the word out that there will be no legislation to regulate rents or lift the ban at the state level, including the home rule petition. There is an opportunity to do a initiative petition and referendum in 2024, but it would clearly take a broad coalition and a lot of resources. Would you consider leading and helping to convene a coalition to do an initiative petition? There's a deadline coming up pretty fast for text, so it would take some fast moves. But would you be willing to take the lead on that so that we could join you in that?
Thank you, Michael, for all that you do and for raising this issue. You know, when I'm asked what are the top 3 issues stressing residents across the city, I say housing, housing, housing. It really is what is displacing kids out of our school system, affecting our recovery from the pandemic in terms of our economy. And many folks have been on the ground advocating for a very long time for the protections that we need. I have not gotten word specifically from the legislature, but have been in several conversations where the idea of a ballot initiative has shaped statewide policy. Basically every election cycle, the last couple, something major has come out of it, whether it's driver's licenses for all or protections for fair wages and all of that. I wanted to be really clear about what Boston would need, so I think it really depends on what the language of the ballot initiative would say. If it is about generically letting cities do their thing, that's great, and Boston has been very specific about what we would do and how that would work in our city. If it becomes more detailed and prescriptive in a way that I worry it might not fit every city's situation, that would be a little bit different. So I think the language matters a lot. But we are all affected by this, so happy to engage in more conversations.
Michael, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it. You know, we've asked you every month about what the situation is with the charge of, I believe it's unnecessary excessive force against this guy who's got a lot of such charges in his years in the force, this Danilecki guy. And I assume, since we haven't heard, there's still no...
I don't have a specific update on him, but I will remind myself.
But we asked the Attorney General when she was here, I think a couple of weeks ago, whether or not this post commission, a statewide thing, if she felt it was appropriate for it to get involved in individual local misconduct cases. Here's what Andrea Campbell had to say.
So the post commission, we view, and we stay in contact with them, and we're pushing them and working in collaboration, is to take on those individual officer cases, to look at, does the misconduct rise to a level where someone should be decertified to never work in law enforcement ever again?
Can they do that even before there's a finding by the local?
That's the part to figure out, but we're pushing them to be more involved because they're up here at the state level, I think, where there's less conflict of interest, maybe other reasons why they should play that role.
Does that trouble you? I mean, the whole notion of the state having some level of involvement in individual misconduct determinations on local level?
No, I think the post commission has been a really important reform, and frankly has been a needed backstop. So far we have not necessarily seen them leaping ahead of cities, but you can imagine a situation where there has been documented either misconduct or some other factors, and then each municipality still has to go through a very extensive arbitration-related process, whereas the state can just say, we've seen enough, there it is.
Fair enough. Let's go to Ann in the South End. Welcome to the show. You're on with the mayor. Hey.
Hi, Mayor Wu. My question is, at some point, are you going to address the lack of body-worn cameras in the shooting of Justin Root? Not one officer has been disciplined who failed to activate their body-worn cameras per BPD policy. And do you have anything in place to ensure this doesn't happen again during the next shooting? It feels there's no accountability for officers who violated BPD's own policies.
Ann, thank you.
Thank you. I just continue to grieve with the Root family and others. I know this has been a many years long journey, and while I need to get back to you to understand what is the latest in this case, I can say that the use of body-worn cameras and the availability, the access to the footage is now, I think, pretty firmly on track. We have a surveillance ordinance in the city of Boston that documents privacy issues and data retention and the many factors that relate to surveillance technology. And in fact, in Boston, there has been a practice where whenever there is the horrible situation of an officer-involved shooting, that footage, as soon as it is cleared and the investigation is far enough along that it won't jeopardize anything legally, that footage is usually publicly shared with in a group that includes local advocates and community members, just so there is that full transparency.
Anne, thank you for the call. We wish you luck. Thank you.
I believe was that the person that was suffering from mental illness and was outside one of the hospitals and was ultimately, I think, shot in Brookline. Yeah, okay, I just want to be clear that was that case. You know, Mayor, you jumped into the pool the other day in East Boston. And
literally, you're talking about.
Literally,
yes,
you did. Yeah, everybody
yeah.
get the pictures on the news. But you made a point, I think, that maybe a lot of people are aware of. There's like a racial disparity in who knows how to swim and who doesn't. So tell us about that.
Yeah, we're a city that is right on the water, and the opportunities to think about being a New Englander and go to the beach and enjoy this and that part of being in this region. Far too many of our residents don't enjoy that because the water is scary and dangerous. If you don't know how to swim, the odds, I mean, even in the news, we see time and again the preventable drownings of so many with access to swim lessons, training, equipment, life jackets, etc. So we've been making a real push in the city of Boston. It's led by our Chief of Human Services, Jose Masso, who himself first got his start as a lifeguard in one of our BCYF centers that he now oversees. And you see the racial disparities. Black and brown children are far less likely to know how to swim, often connected to the disparities in their parents' generation.
Right.
If you're a child of parents who don't know how to swim, you are far, far, far less likely to know how to swim because there's already that understandable and, in fact, rightly so, fear of being near the water. And so we want to make this a multi-generational push to create access and safety for all, to save lives. Drowning is the number one source of cause for fatalities in young children. And this is something that, as a region where we want people to be safe and healthy and active and have opportunities to cool down in increasingly hot summers, having a strategy and intentionality around swimming is really important. So we have 500 free swim lesson slots across the city this year. We have free lifeguard trainings, programs for anybody who wants to get a job as a lifeguard. We are providing 100 free life jackets for families to be able to have, especially with access points around some of our coastal areas. And we're opening up more and more of our pools that had been closed because of facilities issues, which in East Boston, that's the one that I jumped in. We've new renovation completed, or because of staffing issues where we've been able to staff up.
Okay, so you play Mozart on the stage at Symphony Hall.
Generally
you
stay
jump in a
afloat in
pool
water.
in East Boston. What's next?
What's next? I had to leave the event early, but I was on the basketball court just a little bit ago with the governor and lieutenant governor celebrating the kickoff of the state and city's partnership. The state has a program called Summer Nights with free youth programming in many sites across the Commonwealth, including more than 30 organizations in Boston. So they had their sneakers on. I was going to take them on in my wedges, but I had to come here.
Could you dunk over Healy? Have you ever thought about that?
I could not dunk.
Okay, fine. Let's go to Beverly in the Fenway. You're on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hey, Beverly.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Hi. So thank you, Mayor Wu, for all you're doing. I've got some reverb, I'm sorry, on my phone. Anyway.
We can hear you.
I would like to suggest that some of these empty buildings also be used for artist spaces. Our city has several major art schools that are graduating artists who can no longer afford to work in our city and have to leave. And the same thing for artists such as myself who started organizations like Fort Point and SOA and can no longer afford to work there. So artists create communities. Why not, in addition to finding housing for people who need homes, which is absolutely essential, how about finding some artist work-only spaces in those empty buildings?
Great question, Beverly. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the examples that you pointed to, Fort Point and SOA, I mean, these are in some ways the reason why some of these neighborhoods are thriving today is because artists built them and made them beautiful and vibrant and exciting. So in fact, part of our downtown revitalization plan is looking at how we can incorporate more arts everywhere. This is something that New York did as well. Whether it was, when they had a glut of lots of extra office space after bank mergers and situations a couple decades ago, they did convert some to housing, and then some of them were actually made available as low-cost or no-cost arts administration spaces, because sometimes an office building isn't going to be fit for being a performance space or a studio necessarily, but many of the arts organizations, if they can move in to their administrative offices, it just reduces the cost burden. They can put those dollars somewhere else. So I will say, as a big picture thing, we created a new planning advisory council that is meant to reshape how all of our decisions are made around the growth of our city, not just buildings evaluated one by one on their own by the BPDA or the ZBA, Boston Planning and Development Agency, or the Zoning Board of Appeals, but to get our agencies around the table that are all interconnected. So those groups, the BPDA is leading that, but also the Environment Department is there, the Disability Commission to plan for accessibility in new growth, small businesses, transportation, and very importantly, the Arts and Culture Cabinet is embedded in that council as well, because we believe that arts has to be part of how we grow. There's been more and more of a push to create dedicated artist buildings as part of mitigation and new developments as well. And so I know we're many, many years late in this effort, but our hope is to very firmly make sure that arts can stay and is part of the infrastructure here.
Beverly, thanks.
Yeah, we want to squeeze in one more call. We have a gentleman at the Boston Public Library microphone, Edwin, with a question for the mayor. Is Edwin still here?
He is.
He is.
Hello there, Edwin.
Thank you, Edwin.
What's up?
Hi, everyone. Can I get the question, please? Hi. I'm part of, I'm working with the Jamaica Plain City Committee in Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council. And we're worried about the MBTA reconstruction around the Forest Hills area. And we wanted to know why is the city prioritizing SALT over housing by refusing to vacate the DPW yard in regard to all that?
You're talking about the Arborway Yards?
Yeah.
Got it. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being involved. And hi, Sarah, as well. So this is a really, okay, so talk about planning and the need for us to be really intentional about all the various pieces that have to fit together when we have the opportunity to see something different and to see development in our community. The Arborway Yards is a very large parcel that is owned by the MBTA and is slated for the ability to have our bus system become electrified with charging and a new bus garage and all. That would take up some of the parcel. We definitely want a significant chunk of the parcel to be housing. It's housing that's affordable to our residents. And currently, the city of Boston has a small piece of that with our salt pile and other pieces of our public works that are needed to make sure we have fast times to be able to respond to different places. We are looking at it. I want to make sure that we can do our part and not just kind of stick in the way of grander plans that would satisfy many different needs. We have to figure out if we move something, where we would move it to, and so there's a lot of complications there, but I know we're working very closely and want to see some way where we can help support the larger vision.
Mayor, before you go, we started today's show with Marjorie talking incessantly about wanting to see a cage match between Elon Musk and
I want no part of that.
Mark Zuckerberg. But putting that aside,
Just mischaracterizing what I said.
no, I'm not. The
usual.
underlying discussion was about the creation of threads, and as we said, there are roughly 250 million users on Twitter. In a week, 100 million people signed up for Zuckerberg's Meta thing, Threads, which is a sort of variation on Twitter. You told us a couple of months ago you're going to reduce your use, your personal use, which you have, I just checked. Obviously, as a mayor, you're still tweeting. Are you on Threads? And what's your
I am
whole
on Threads. Yeah, I posted a couple times so far on the first day. I think, I joined Mastodon when that became available, and then it seemed to taper off. The point of being on any social media platform is connecting with people, with others, and for me, particularly connecting with our Boston residents. Twitter had gotten to be so noisy and chaotic and frankly full of harassment from all sides there was just no room left for thoughtful conversation or even to reach people in our community in a way that was much more unstructured. I think the beauty of Twitter before is you shouldn't have to come to City Hall to be able to participate in a meeting or even come ask a question here. Send a message and hopefully someone who knows about it can, I've had lots of amazing experiences on Twitter, taking a picture of a sea creature in Boston Harbor saying, "What is this?" And then a squid expert responded who had a PhD in something and gave the exact genus and species.
I believe it is, yes.
So Threads doesn't quite have that critical mass yet, but I think it's very promising because it's linked to Instagram and there was it's pretty easy to switch over. Not everyone has made it over there yet, so it's still much, much, much less engagement than on Twitter in its heyday, but I remain hopeful that we can find a way where people can, again, have that more democratic feeling, connection, and public forum.
So before you go, the flan is beyond belief. It's fabulous. One more time, where'd you get it? On Blue Hill Ave?
Blue Hill Ave. Come out and enjoy them, and many, many other small businesses at Open Streets this Saturday.
Great.
Fantastic.
Mayor Wu, it's great to see you as always. Michelle Wu, thank you.
Wu, thank you very much for coming. We very much appreciate it. We'll hope to see you next month for Ask the Mayor. We apologize for not getting to all the calls and texts, but we did the best we could. Thank you very much again to Mayor Wu. Coming up, we're going to talk about the latest out of D.C. with CNN's John King. Washington Roundup with John King is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
Being a GBH member has many benefits, including access to thousands of hours of PBS programs through GBH Passport. From Masterpiece to Nova, American Experience to Antiques Roadshow, popular newer shows like All Creatures Great and Small, even older favorites like The French Chef. And it's all included in your GBH membership. So if you're already a member, just register online today. Or become a member and start streaming your favorite PBS shows at gbh.org/passport.
Support for our programs comes from you and Sunbug Solar, a full-service local solar energy company committed to being a renewable energy partner that guides homeowners and businesses through the solar process, from consultation to installation. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com. And the Village Bank. The Village Bank was created over a century ago to help people build their dreams and create a better community. Learn more at village-bank.com. Member FDIC, member DIF.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Mark Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. For the next segment, we said to our producers, can you just find us some random person wearing a Boston Red Sox t-shirt? They apparently found someone. He's from Dorchester. I think he also, by day, is CNN's chief national correspondent. That would be John King. Hello there, John.
Hi,
How
John.
are you?
Hi, I'm sorry for the casual look. I'm filling in for Wolf tonight, so I have to put on my suit and tie in a little bit. But I just thought I would come do some bureaucracy in my new, still developing office in a casual look. What do we think?
You look lovely.
It looks
Boston Red
terrific.
Sox.
It looks
Love
terrific.
it.
And we'll look forward to seeing you tonight at Wolf Blitzer. Well, I got to tell you, John King, as soon as I opened up the paper Sunday morning, read Maureen Downs' column in the New York Times, I said, I can't wait to talk to John King about this, because I was very surprised. President Biden has 6 grandchildren, but he apparently has a 7th grandchildren that he's estranged from, I guess, to say the least. This is the child of his son, Hunter Biden, that had a baby out of wedlock, which is certainly not uncommon in 2023. But tell us about the situation with the president and this 7th grandchild.
I don't know personally a ton about it, except that this has been a common theme, that it's just something that the president and Jill Biden have just sort of, for whatever reason, and these things are deeply personal, just walled off, just walled it off. We know from the Hunter Biden investigations, we know from the death of Beau Biden, the tragic death of Beau Biden, that there are certain family things that are, they're central to Biden. His life outside of politics, if you will. And we live in an age, of course, where there's no such thing as having to separate your personal from the professional or the political in the commentary. But I don't pretend to read minds. We've talked about many interesting, and sometimes hard to explain, inexplicable family dynamics and political dynamics over the years in these conversations. And I don't get it. I don't get it in the sense that if you watch him interact, how loyal he has been to Hunter Biden. A lot of political people have urged him to push Hunter Biden away, and yet Hunter Biden gets to come to the state dinner, and he gets to be at the Easter egg roll and things like that. And so on the one hand, you see a president who's ignoring, if you will, the political advice around his family to say, no, that's a member of my family, and everything else be damned. And to this one, which is sort of a strange, almost like case of, you might call it denial. And again, I don't want to try to read minds or judge people. I don't understand the day-to-day and the years-to-years dynamic of it all. But I do think it's another interesting piece of what, if you go through the Biden family, there are some really, I don't know, I'm trying to find a neutral word for it, but just fascinating dynamics, different dynamics.
Let me just say one last thing about this, is ordinarily we don't ask questions about politicians' families. I mean, families are ordinarily used as props in politics, at least in my opinion. But the reason Marjorie broached it is exactly for why John said it a minute ago. One of the things I hope people love about Joe Biden, even if you hate his policies and his politics, is this somebody who clearly loves his family, and it's hugely important to him not to get votes, but because
it seems unusual,
because
this is I think a 4-year-old child. Obviously, the child didn't do anything wrong, and it just seems odd.
So out of character.
It seems out of character, I guess, that you would somehow have the child kind of ostracized when it wasn't the child's fault. It seems out of character for Joe Biden.
Well, he also says he talks to each of his 6 grandchildren every single day.
And it kind of gives me a bad feeling about Joe Biden, I guess is why I asked it.
In any case, John King, can we stay
hold on.
I'm sorry.
See what he said about it.
Go ahead,
Is there anything more you want to say about it?
No, I don't have anything more to say about it. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree completely that it is an anomaly.
Yeah.
If you look at how loyal he is, how resistant he has been. Look, there are legitimate questions about Hunter Biden's business dealings, some of Biden's brother's business dealings. All of that comes into the public sphere when you're the president of the United States, or when you're the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, or when you're the vice president of the United States, as Joe Biden has been. And yet he still golfs with his brother. He still has Hunter Biden quite visibly, which is in a way, it's I don't know if defiant is the right word, but it's a way to say, look, this is my flesh and blood. And it will always be my flesh and blood, through thick and through thin and through controversy. So I do think that particular episode, or this particular case, the grandchild, is an anomaly. And that in itself just makes it interesting.
I agree with that. Can we stay on Biden for a second? How concerned are they in the White House about, I know it's really early, but RFK Jr. appears to have a little bit of staying power. He's every poll I've seen from day one, 15 to 20% range. He's not disappearing. Are they worried about this continued candidacy?
They say no, but they clearly are keeping a very close eye on it. So you're even closer to this. I'm about to go on the road more, and I think hopefully I'll be a more informed guest answering this question in a couple of months than I am today. But so part of their thinking is, look, a lot of that, where Robert Kennedy might sting Joe Biden, especially if Joe Biden's name is not on the ballot in New Hampshire for the primary, is that, how much of that is Joe Biden is quote unquote weak. Democrats are looking for something else, or looking to send a message, and how much of that is a lot lot of New Hampshire Democrats are PO'd, you know what I'm saying when I say that, at Joe Biden because he changed the primary calendar. And so this is a parochial way of New Hampshire sort of, why did Robert F. Kennedy, for example, Jr. get to speak to the legislature? Well, Democrats did that because they're mad at Joe Biden for changing the primary. And so how much of it is a somewhat parochial New Hampshire thing, or does it last beyond that? Team Biden thinks whatever bruises, if it gets that far, if it causes a bruise, if it causes a question for a week or two, is the president weak? Are Democrats jittery? That it will be very quick and very passing. They don't think it will amount to much, but obviously when you do see in some polling, high teens or 20%, depending where you're looking, that's something you need to keep an eye on. And incumbent presidents go through this. They want to say this is a fringe primary challenge. This doesn't mean anything. The voters will let us know in the not too distant future whether that's correct.
We're talking to John King from CNN.
Meanwhile, on the Republican side, Ron DeSantis, who is the hope for at least some people disaffected with President Trump, was going to get somewhere, but it looks like he's not getting anywhere.
I think this has been a very frustrating spring and summer so far for Ron DeSantis. But, and this is a very important but, if you talk to his team, they say, sure, they would rather have the poll numbers they had in March than the poll numbers they have now in mid-July, and we're heading closer to August. Yes, he has slipped in all of the national and in the state polls you look at. They insist, as do some of the other candidates, that they are doing the work that matters most, which is county by county or township by township, whether you're talking about Iowa or New Hampshire, and that they still have time to prove themselves, and that they will prove themselves. You heard Governor DeSantis, there's still a question as to whether Donald Trump participates in the first debate,
right,
which is at the end of August. And DeSantis saying quite plainly last week, it's an important part of the process. He will be there, Trump or no Trump. And so I do think without a doubt, DeSantis has probably raised more questions than he has answered in recent months on the campaign trail. But there is plenty of time to get it together. I think how good is the DeSantis team? How convincing is he when he goes to these town halls in places like Iowa and New Hampshire as he tries to slowly build back up? Some of this is on him, and I think this also, Jim and Marjorie, gets into the question of, how long are we going to have 10 or 12 Republican candidates? And will there come a point either after this first debate, after Labor Day, by Thanksgiving or Christmas, where a bunch of them get out because they're unable to raise money or move their poll numbers, or do they stay in through, we now know Iowa will be in January, and then we will go from there. Do they stay in? Because the longer you have this crowded field, it benefits Trump. It simply does. Even if DeSantis is right now, by far, the first alternative, if you will, still way behind. In some polls, 30 points behind Trump. In some national polls, 20-something points behind Trump. We don't have a lot of good state-by-state polling, which as we get closer to the start of the new year will matter a lot more than the national poll numbers. But I think there's a can DeSantis regain. They would argue they have regained their footing. Whichever you agree with, can they slow build as we get toward the end of the year, and then does everybody else stay in? Because if everybody else stays in, it's harder for anybody to build when you have 2% here, 2% there, and so on and so forth. So both the individual test for DeSantis and the group dynamic, to me, are the big stories in the Republican primary as we go sort of up to Thanksgiving or so.
One last, I think, fairly big story, at least to me, in the Republican primary is, do you remember when, I think it was during the Iraq War, that Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, was referred to as Bush's poodle by critics at home? I think you could fairly say that the Speaker of the House is Trump's poodle, or at least has been, historically. After saying what an outrage January 6th was, he scurries down to Florida to have one of those thumbs-up photographs with Trump. What is going on that McCarthy is not endorsing Trump's candidacy as early as I'm sure Trump thinks he's entitled to have, if you know what I mean?
You've seen Donald Trump go after the Republican governor of Iowa in recent days.
Reynolds,
and I do think it's a fair thing to put on a notepad. When does will the McCarthy thing become a Trump thing some point down the line? McCarthy's point has been he's the Speaker of the House. It's a constitutional job. He's the leader of even Democrats and Republicans in the House, not just Republicans. So that has been his line. But you've also seen him when Trump has gotten mad in the past. You mentioned after the January 6th remarks, there were a few other occasions where Trump is mad about something and McCarthy has tried to keep the peace. so I do think that's a fascinating dynamic to watch. I think beneath that, though, another interesting dynamic is just Donald Trump's doing very well with the other House Republicans. Very, very well. The loyalty factor among House Republicans is quite remarkable. And that is a strength for Trump, if you will, as he goes forward. They just rolled out today an announcement of the entire Republican House delegation from Michigan. Not an early primary state, but a key November battleground state if Trump is the nominee. And so the House Republicans, we've talked about this before in terms of policy. We've talked about this before, the personality of Trump. The Senate is very skeptical of Trump. Senate Republicans are, by and large, very skeptical of Trump. But House Republicans are staying, by and large, in the Trump column, which to me is just a fascinating, again, Republican voters will settle this starting in January, but to watch the continuing Trump effect, A, as we watch the polling in the race, but B, just today, they're picking the grand jurors in Fulton County,
right.
Who we expect in a couple of weeks are going to have to vote whether to indict Donald Trump or not. That's the question the prosecutor will put before them. And yet, Donald Trump's political strength has diminished, and you could argue has actually increased in the middle of all that.
And meanwhile, his lawyers in the Mar-a-Lago documents case have asked the court, and this is where Eileen Cannon, that was criticized before for being too helping Trump in the last case involving these documents, to delay his trial, I think, until after the election. So do we have a sense of where Eileen Cannon is? I mean, she could either have been chastised after getting kind of trashed by every legal mind in the country about her last decision about what the FBI and the investigators could do, or maybe she's emboldened. I have no idea. But does he have a legitimate quest to delay this trial for so long?
Does he have a legitimate case to make that this is an incredibly complicated and sensitive case because it involves classified documents? Absolutely. Whether his name is Donald Trump or John Doe, everybody should respect that. This is incredibly complicated, incredibly sensitive. But does that mean he should be able to stall it until, say, after the election? Then if he wins the election, he can tell the Justice Department to just drop it?
Yeah.
That's a fascinating question about power going forward, but we're not there yet. I do think, to your point, there are a lot of skeptics about Judge Cannon. We're going to learn a lot more about the judge, and my argument would be give her the benefit of the doubt. Everybody deserves that. But she has a hearing next week scheduled to start discussing how do you handle classified documents. That's a huge issue in every layer of this case, in the sense that how does the government handle the classified documents when they're sharing with the two defendants, Donald Trump and Walt Nauta, his aide? What rules will be placed on those teams? If you get a bigger legal team as you're getting closer to trial and you want more mind, how many of them have to have security clearances? Who can see what? Who can check in with the judge? If there are any questions about impropriety. So I could go on for an hour about this, just in terms of how do they handle the discovery, the evidence in the pretrial part. Then you have to, what can you put before a jury? And so her rulings in these early procedural tests and the rules of engagement, if you will, going forward, will give you a sense of, number one, is this judge, how does she interpret the law? And if there are appeals of those rulings, if there are, we'll see how the higher courts view them. And number two, how quickly does she make those decisions and then schedule the next one? Is she on a path where, she wants to move as quickly as possible? Donald Trump, we've seen this before, and we're seeing it from Walt Nauta's legal team, and there's no doubt that Trump and the Nauta team are working, hand in hand here. Their view is stall it, delay it as long as you can.
One last thing about Trump, at least from me, is we have an issue here that I won't go into in Massachusetts, where the narrative is the left is eating its own around criticizing a very progressive state rep because they didn't like someone he endorsed, including our governor and that sort of thing. And there's a parallel on the right in Washington with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Freedom Caucus. And I'm still not, it's almost like, if you're too nutty for the Freedom Caucus, you're really out there. Could you briefly describe, is it just because she used the B word about Lauren Boebert, another lunatic in the Republican Party? What was that all about, John King?
It's in part that, and it's in part because she has been so loyal to Kevin McCarthy. After being more of a dissident, more of a backbencher, She now has been very loyal to McCarthy, and the Freedom Caucus is where you've had the disagreements with McCarthy over the debt ceiling bill, over why haven't we brought more of our conservative legislation to the floor? Why aren't we impeaching Mayorkas, and why aren't we moving forward with impeaching Biden? That's where you get the agitation is from the Freedom Caucus, and she has become. Again, this chapter, we're in the middle of this book, doesn't mean she won't go back in some ways, but she's become more of a McCarthy, almost leadership establishment type, even though that was not her MO when she first came to Congress. And that rankles members of the Freedom Caucus who wanted her, because of her social media platform, because of her visibility, they want her as an ally, and they view her now increasingly as, if not an enemy, at least as someone who's not with them.
Okay, fair enough.
So the New York Times, John King has a piece, the headline of which is "The Case That Could Be Fox's Next Dominion." People may remember that Fox had to pay, I think it was $787 million or something like that, for lying about the Dominion voting machines during the last election. They've got another case coming up from Smartmatic, another election machine that they accused on Fox, or let people accuse on Fox of faulty machines. And they've had a lot of other suits, but this one, I saw this guy and his wife, Ray Ebbs. They were, I think it was 60 Minutes where I saw them. I'm not really sure, but anyway, Tucker Carlson got Ray Ebbs and his wife or at least Mr. Ebbs, over and over accusing him of being not charged in the January 6th assault on the Capitol because he was a federal agent, even though there seems to be no evidence that he was a federal agent at all. He repeated Mr. Ebbs' name over and over in nearly 20 episodes, according to the New York Times. So this is another, this guy's a private citizen whose life has been turned into a nightmare because he was targeted by Tucker Carlson.
Yes, and now obviously Tucker Carlson no longer with Fox, but if you go back and look at those things, you can go so deep into a rabbit hole, Marjorie, with the conspiracy and with the smearing and the innuendo without any factual basis behind it. In terms of the Smartmatic case, most of the smart legal people assume that Fox will try to settle that one as well, because what the Smartmatic people say is we learned a lot from the Dominion. Right? You had so much public discovery, you had all those texts unfolded, so they have access to all of that. And then a good team says, okay, they uncovered this. What else is there, or what else do we want here? And so you've also seen in some other smaller or different legal issues some.
Oops.
Oops.
I think we have a bit of a freeze.
I think we've lost John there for a second.
Permanently there.
But the basic thrust of this case is that Epps kept saying, "I want a retraction. I want a retraction. I'm not a federal agent." He was indeed there on January 6th, but apparently he was urging people not to be violent and destructive, and he was never charged. Although officials there, law enforcement, was well aware of this guy. He's in pictures and everything else. And what I don't understand is, the rule is, if you go after someone when you know as a journalist that what you're saying is false, that's like big sin number one, right?
Well, I think you described what the consequence occasionally is, $787 million.
Yeah.
Is John back? I think is John back?
Oh,
so
yeah.
Where were you going with that?
I just wonder what you thought of it. It's like I was saying during the interim there, John. To knowingly say Jim Browdy murdered 7 people over and over again on TV every night, when I know Jim Browdy didn't murder 7 other people, he might have done a lot of other bad things.
But that's why they paid $800 million?
Right. But you wonder why they would allow this. I just don't get it, this constant trashing of this guy when I think they knew it wasn't true.
You raised the key question again. We went through in Dominion that the text messages, the emails, the depositions laid out pretty clearly and plainly that enough of them in senior positions, and even the people saying it on television, questioned it and knew it wasn't true. And so then you get into the whole idea, there's libel, which you have to prove malice, defamation. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want something. I might get some of the semicolons quite wrong here, but can you prove malicious intent? Can you prove, as opposed to quote unquote free speech, where you can say just about anything you want? But that's what I meant when I said, the Smartmatic lawyers say they learned a ton from both the strategy and then the facts that came out, all those text messages and emails and depositions in the Dominion case, where most of the people around it think that now Smartmatic could refuse, but at some point, if Fox came to the table with a generous settlement offer, that it would be in the company's interest to just get all of these things off the table, because in every single one of them, what have we learned? More embarrassing, horrific things. The conduct of some of the Fox News people on television, but also I'll call it benign neglect of the management, which knew better and didn't do enough to stop it.
So before you go, John King, if people aren't watching on Facebook or on YouTube, John is wearing a Boston Red Sox t-shirt before he dresses up to sit in for Wolf Blitzer. Are you the kind of, everybody knows you're the biggest Red Sox fan, you're from here, Dorchester, etc. Are you the kind of fan who, after the Red Sox beat the worst team in baseball 3 straight games, say we're on a roll? What kind of person are you, John King, when it comes to your Sox?
I think they have stabilized themselves, and they're not a terrible team. That doesn't mean they're a good team. And so I think they have interesting choices to make at the trading deadline. Number one, to me, the key is Trevor Story really coming back? Are we going to have a real shortstop? I love Kike Hernandez. He's not an everyday shortstop. And so if you're going to if Trevor Story is really coming back and you're going to have a real shortstop, and Jarren Duran's, hopefully it continues, his amazing play of late has stabilized the outfield situation, then you could nibble modestly, try to get a couple of starting pitchers and see if you can make a run at a wild card. If Story's not coming back, then you need a shortstop and a couple of starting pitchers, and that's a steeper hill at the trade deadline. So you should book Chaim Bloom in my spot next Tuesday and grill him. Grill him. Don King wants to know, when will we see Trevor Story actually on a baseball field in a uniform playing a game?
We're on it.
To me, that's the key. I'm not going to get Pollyannish, Jim. I do think they have improved their position where you could make some tweaks and they would have a viable chance at being a wild card team. The question is, does the management want to spend the money to do that? We'll see. We'll talk about it next Tuesday, I bet.
Okay. There's a fact-based man, if there ever was one. Good to see you, John King. We'll be watching tonight. Thanks so much.
As always, appreciate all your insights.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. We've been speaking, of course, with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King. You see him all the time on CNN. You're going to see him tonight if you're watching at, I think, 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, I think, is when Wolf Blitzer is usually on. Anyway, up next, it is Amazon Prime Day, which gives us an excuse to talk about something having to do with clutter. Do we love so-called sentimental clutter, quote unquote, because of what it says about our lives or people in our lives, or are we just hoarders like Jim? My Tesla trunk is full and overflowing. Browdy, the number is 877-301-8970. You know, I was big on to getting rid of clutter until I read a couple of these stories, and I really thought I was not sentimental enough about the clutter.
Big on getting rid of clutter until Marie Kondo did a 180. I mean, even she's not against clutter anymore.
Well, that's because she's got children. She decided she had to save a couple of the kids' paintings. But anyway, we're going to talk about clutter. Open the lines to you at 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are at the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
From the sensuality of the tango, a pas de deux as part of a classical ballet, to the energy in jazz. What does dance teach us about ourselves? Our Ask A series returns, and we share your stories about movement and performance when we ask a choreographer. Next time on 1A.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Legal Seafoods, now offering takeout platters for delivery and pickup, and reopen in Burlington and Hingham after full renovations. Private event space also available for your social gatherings. Reservations at LegalSeafoods.com. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked among the best children's hospitals in the nation by U.S. News & World Report. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live from the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. It's actually one of my favorite topics. You know, earlier this year, as Marjorie said, Marie Kondo made headlines by declaring she'd kind of given up on tidying up the entire premise she'd built her brand around is because they're young kids and it was a mess and she was okay with it. But did she have a point? There's a new piece in the Atlantic. It's called Minimalism is Neat, but Clutter Makes a Home. It makes the case that the little tchotchkes we have around the house are what really make our space feel like us and should be celebrated, even if they don't look aesthetically pleasing. And since, as Marjorie said, it is Amazon Prime Day, are you throwing away the rigid rules of interior design in favor of a more emotionally gratifying home full of all your stuff? Junk you got on Amazon or otherwise, maybe you're just a hoarder trying to rationalize your habits. We want to know where you are on clutter in July of 2023. Are you where Marie Kondo was when she made millions, or where she is today, which is bring it on in terms of the clutter? As that Atlantic piece, I think we said this.
Oh my
They
God.
say it satisfies a deeper emotional need,
Okay.
and I can totally relate to that. The number is 877-301-8970.
Okay, this piece in the Atlantic by Annie Midori Atherton, I was like weeping by the end
It's a
of it
great piece.
because she was talking all about how she had clutter everywhere, but then she detailed the clutter that she had. For example, she had a yellow luggage tag from her grandfather that was carried throughout different trips he made.
Sentimental.
And horrible trips. He was one of the World War II Japanese Americans that was sent to an internment camp during the war, so she had that.
She calls it sentimental clutter, doesn't she?
Sentimental clutter, that's
Yeah.
right. She talks about dragging this stuff around to 12 different apartments, and she gets to one of the things I think that Marie Kondo ran into, because I love Marie Kondo, the decluttering, because I had all this stuff all over my house. But when you have children, I mean, your kids come home from preschool, daycare, regular school, with these horrible, drawings that they do of like, scribbles and stuff like that. You're going to throw them out, Jim? You're going to
take a picture.
You take a picture.
Take a picture, and then you throw it out.
And then you throw out the physical thing? I don't think so.
No, you
I think
can't.
you have to save the physical thing. So that's one of the problems. What do you do about when you have little kids? And she talked about, she had this now this is not a little kid story. She had a stash under her bed of old clothes, including the frilly top. This is the Atherton piece in the Atlantic that she wore on her 21st birthday.
Keep it.
And she just could not bear. Well, you keep everything.
I don't keep everything.
Well, you do.
I did a lot of Marie Kondo does the Spark Joy for a while there.
Yeah.
She says in this piece, she uses a great expression.
She's a really good
in
writer.
one sense, a home is a personal museum.
That's right.
For example, do you keep tickets from major things you've been to in your life?
I do.
Like what? What do you have?
Oh, like rock concerts I went to, or Bruce Springsteen, or
Personal
something
museum.
like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't leave them around the house. I put them in what everybody does. They go get plastic bins and they shove them in a closet, or they shove them in the basement somewhere. So I have bins full of stuff I'm sentimental about, and I'm sure that, when I depart this mortal coil, my children would just throw everything out.
I think so.
And that would be the end
They
of that.
may not wait till you depart this mortal coil,
They
actually.
may do it sooner, but this other piece by Rob Walker from the New York Times talks about Joan Didion, one of my favorite writers. I mean,
Great.
everybody loves Joan Didion, and she's no longer with us.
No, she's not.
And she had this auction. Well, she didn't because she was dead. But her family had this auction of her personal effects, which included a box of loose buttons. Very important to save those buttons.
Because you never know when you'll need a particular button.
A bunch of seashells and pebbles, a miscellaneous group of eyewear. She was famous for her big glasses. And these things sold for a lot of money. She had one pair of eyeglasses went for $10,000. One of her pairs of sunglasses went for $27,000. Now she's famous. That's why it went for that kind of money.
Yes, she was.
But it kind of made me rethink. Maybe I should be cluttering up my house more than it's already cluttered.
Well, let me just say, this afternoon at 3 o'clock outside GBH, I'll be selling all the things in the trunk of my car at reasonable discounts. I'll initial most of them. Our number is 877-301-8970. We want to know if you're pro or anti-clutter in your personal life. And if you're pro or con, well, obviously you're one of them, we assume, as opposed to neutral. What's the rationale? What's the motivation? Is it your personal museum? Does it satisfy a deeper emotional need? Another writer, I can't remember who wrote this piece, said having all this stuff creates permanence in the intimate life of a person, whatever that means.
Barbara in Somerville.
Hi, Barbara.
What do you
Welcome.
think of this whole thing?
Hello, Barbara. Well, that's a good start.
Is Barbara there?
Barbara, hi. We'll put Barbara on hold. We'll get back to her in a second. Where do you want us to go? Paul in Worcester. Hey there, Paul. How are you?
Hi, Marjorie and Jim. How are you?
We're excellent.
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for calling, Paul.
I'm pro keeping stuff, not so much clutter, but keeping stuff. And Jim, do you remember reading something recently? Doesn't everyone have a box of rubber caps in their basement?
Rubber caps?
Yeah.
I do not.
I don't throw things away, and I usually find a use for them. And it's whether it's pieces of plastic from, I don't mean like scraps of plastic, but I make things out of scrap wood, out of scrap, all kinds of different things. But it's not like clutter, like thrown all over.
Well,
the place
with all due respect, you're not a
disarray.
good example because you are a craftsman in your life, which we both have benefited from. Personally, if you're a craftsman and you're keeping stuff around to further your craft, you're not in a category like Marjorie or me. You don't keep crap, right? You keep stuff that may be useful in your trade, right?
Yeah, but it's also a different example is when my son was here and I was going over, my will and that kind of thing because I'm getting old. And he said, well, the good thing is you compared to his grandmother on the other side, that your stuff is all kind of in one place. Whereas grandma, it's everywhere. It's on every table. It's on every counter. He said, but your clutter is kind of contained.
That's beautiful. Well, you're a good dad, obviously. Hey, Paul, thank you for the call. We appreciate you calling in. So what Jamie has done, because I guess it was off yesterday, he felt like he was in withdrawal, I assume he has asked AI to generate a Jim Browdy, that'd be me, amidst clutter. Is that what I assume? And I am surrounded by crap.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, that guy's hair is exactly like mine.
It is.
I mean, it's
very,
really
it's very good. And there's a lot of clutter there. It's just like yours.
A lot of clutter.
I mean, you've been unloading boxes for the whole time I've known you, Jim.
I have, and it's very satisfying.
Are you not going to get to the end of these boxes? You seem to have an endless supply of boxes.
By the way, this is not mutually inconsistent. It's not inconsistent.
He's waiting for someone to ask for his papers.
I've not thrown out. I have. Many have asked. I just haven't answered the phone when they've called. By the way, I've gotten rid of a ton of stuff in the last few years, really because of the Marie Kondo thing.
Yeah.
But I have a lot left, and you do develop for example, you said tickets. When I was a little boy, the Phillies were the worst team in baseball. I felt about them like John King feels about the Red Sox. My uncle got us ticket to the World Series, and they lost something like, so I have World Series tickets from the 60s, and they lost something like 11 out of their last 12 games, and they didn't make it into the World Series. I kept those tickets. The other end, I went to Muhammad Ali Frazier one of the greatest nights of my whole life, and I keep that. Should people not? That's the personal museum part. That does always bring back incredible memories.
I guess the question is, where do you keep them? Do you have them strewn about the house, or do you have them like in an organized place?
Oh, I have them in the trunk of my car, obviously, where everything.
In the trunk of your car.
Now that's a very good point. Is do you store them? Or do you keep them and benefit from them in some fashion?
There are people in my life that I go to their house and they've got stuff everywhere.
Like who?
Obviously, Jim, I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, go ahead.
But they've got pictures, they've got papers, they've got stuff all over the place.
What's your point?
Well, I hate
They're like hoarders.
I hate it. It drives me. I get nervous.
Why don't you throw out some of the crap when you get there?
Because it's not my business to throw out the crap. But on the other hand, when they point to things like this woman in this story, I keep going back to in the Atlantic. She says, okay, her father-in-law just died, and her husband has the fancy dress shoes that this dead father-in-law wore to their wedding. Now, how long are you going to keep those in your closet?
What would you do about that? That's a good question.
These questions are not easy.
What would you do with those?
I don't know, Jim. Don't. What would you do?
What would I do with them?
Shoes are pretty big, especially if someone has big feet.
That's a really good question. Kyle in Pembroke, what would you do with that guy's father-in-law's shoes?
Oh, out they go.
Out they go. Thank you. Take it away, Kyle. What's up?
Yeah. My friend's mother passed away about 7 years ago, and we've been going through her stuff and are still in the thick of it.
Oh, my God.
And most of it is garbage. But every now and then we'll come across something like a bag of cash and pearls. And recently we came across a whole box full of political stuff, like buttons and crap. And there was cigarettes from Dukakis and Bush, like from their respective conventions, I assume, but they were like hawking cigarettes.
What was this, like swag in 1988? Is that what it was?
Exactly.
Wow. Now I would keep that.
It was
What would you do? I would keep that. What was your decision?
I'm keeping that, absolutely.
What?
Yeah, it's in the box.
That's pretty neat.
That's
pretty neat.
Kyle, thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay. A texter wants to know, Jim, it has a couple of questions. One texter wants to know if you keep all your Dickies and your whale pants. And a second texter.
Well, by the way, before we go there, I haven't had a dickie in about 30 years. Look them up if you don't know what they are. And I never had whale pants. We're back to the same old topic. Marjorie wrote a really unfair piece about me before I even knew her.
It was
in
right
the
on the money,
90s,
right on
and
the
she
money.
said that
Yeah.
I went around in whale pants driving a Volvo station wagon. One, I didn't have whale pants, and two, I did not have a Volvo station wagon.
Yeah, I was pressured.
Other than that,
You got
it was
one
really,
about
I did
a month
get
after the column
a
came
Volvo
out.
station wagon.
But this other texter is very concerned, as
What
we
is
should
it?
all be. Well, we all know that Jim's poor mother, ashes had been in the trunk of his car for quite some time, and this texter is concerned that Jim's mom is sharing the Tesla trunk with a bunch of
Why does that
and
strike
debris.
you as so? A lot of people keep the ashes of somebody
in the
they
trunk
love,
of their
right?
car?
Well,
Not
what do
the
you?
trunk.
Why not?
Well, I think it's unusual. I've heard people in the closet. Sometimes the parents make it up to the mantelpiece or something, or the grandparents.
She was on the mantelpiece for a while there. She was.
So she went
I don't
from the
consider it
mantelpiece
disrespectful
to
at
the
all.
trunk of the car.
I was moving.
I think the message. Okay, I think the message.
I
to
spent
have
a lot of time in my
Mom
car.
for 10 years in the trunk is not a
Well,
good
if I
message.
may ask, since you bring it up,
Yeah.
where are your mother's ashes?
They're in the cemetery. They're
Oh,
not,
she was
yeah,
buried?
She was buried. Yeah, they're in the
So
cemetery.
if you had your mother's ashes, where would you put them?
Not in the trunk.
Okay, fine.
No question about
Let's
that.
go to Al on the road.
Al on the road.
Hey,
Thank
Al.
you very much.
She is in the trunk, and I think there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay.
I'm sticking to it. Hey, Al, what's going on?
How you doing, guys?
Hey, it's you, Al. Hi.
I'm not a big fan of clutter, but the kitchen refrigerator is where pictures and
Love it.
knickknacks can go.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's the heart of the home. That's the family. Like, you're in if your picture's on the fridge. You're like, all right, I made it into the family. I made it to the fridge.
But wait a
it's,
second.
my grandmother did it.
Are you disciplined enough that that's the extent of the collection or the keeping, or is that just one of many?
I would like to say I am, but there's definitely some spillage.
Spillage.
So,
Good, sir.
spillage, yeah.
Al, thanks for the call as always. Good to hear from you. Appreciate it.
Emma from Cambridge says she is not a hoarder. However, she is still working her way through all the toilet paper she accumulated during COVID. Remember when there was a
Can I tell you,
toilet paper shortage?
on my honor.
And we were going from Walgreens to CVS to Target when we could still shop at Target, every place else trying to get toilet paper.
I'm going to raise my right hand so you
Uh-huh.
know this is true. In the basement of our house, in a bookcase, I'm not exaggerating, we have maybe 40 containers of Lysol spray. 40. So if anybody wants any, they can have them.
Yeah.
What would you do them? Are perfectly good Lysol spray totally a pandemic possession, as that texter said a minute
Yeah.
ago? You don't give them.
I
You don't
guess
get rid of them, do you? You never know when you
never
need
know
them.
when you might need some Lysol. All those
Exactly.
Clorox wipes. I'm going from store to store to store
Love
looking
those.
for Clorox wipes. But toilet paper was a real problem during the pandemic, Emma, so I can see why you hoarded it, and I can see why all these months later you've still got a lot of it to go through.
Do you remember the satisfaction
Of finding the
when you
toilet
found
paper?
like the last 12 pack of toilet paper at the supermarket? I mean, how perverse and horrible that was.
Yeah, well, there were so many things during the pandemic. Tests, COVID tests.
Yeah,
remember? You
I
couldn't
do
get
remember.
COVID tests. That was a big thing.
How about getting a shot?
Yeah, well, that was bad at the beginning.
Kate in Hanover, what's up?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Real quick, Jim, if you're serious about getting rid of cans of Lysol, I know that any teacher, any
That's a very good-
elementary
that's a
school
great point.
would love to have that sort of thing.
That's a great idea. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do
It
it.
smells so bad, though.
No, it's fine.
Lysol smells
Lysol's fine.
terrible.
It's
Don't
fine.
you think, Kate? It
Keep
smells
going, Kate.
bad?
You're doing great. Go ahead.
So, along the lines of teachers in schools, almost every parent out there knows just how much kids' artwork accumulates all throughout the year. It's really hard to get rid of. And there is a service out there. I wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head, but you can send in your children's artwork, and they take professional pictures, and then they send you back a little photo book.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little paperback book that you can put on your shelf.
Well, when you say a little paperback book, when you have 10,000 pieces of art from your children, that, by the way, you identified, Mark, that is about the hardest thing to throw away.
Yeah, here's the thing, Kate. And you're a teacher, so you would know. I mean, you often wonder, because sometimes when my kids were little, I would sneak it off, and then a couple of times I got caught, and they said, what happened to my picture?
Didn't you feel guilty when you're doing
Yes. So, I mean, what is, in your estimation, is the psychological damage done to these little kindergartners when their parents dump their artwork
Well, I mean, if you can commit to keeping it for a certain amount of time, they'll probably forget about it.
Yeah.
If you don't, if they don't, then after a certain amount of time, you can probably guilt-free get rid of it.
By the way, I'm not worried about my kids who are now grown, 29 and 31, finding out about it. I feel like it's wrong. And I intellectually get that it's ridiculous. 90% of it is because it's not that good. And even if it were that good, save a few pieces that have some meaning. But it's really hard to get rid of that stuff, even if it's mountainous kind of thing. Kate, thank you for calling.
I have all these framed maps because my teachers have a wonderful
geography thing.
Wonderful geography teacher, yes, who had them make maps. So they would, by the time they got finished 2 years in his class, they would have map the entire world. So we have South Africa, we have Africa.
You still have those?
We have South America. Yes.
What are you doing with those?
Well, they're sitting in their frames.
Do you have a trunk in your car? Let me tell you one other thing.
Under beds, Jim. That's a great place for that stuff.
The most recent boxes that I was throwing out, because I am doing it at the same time I'm saving. It's not oxymoronic. You know what I saved, which I'm almost too embarrassed to say, but since we're being honest about the art, they're MCAS results. And by the way, they didn't do particularly. They did fine. It isn't like they scored whatever the highest grade is. They did fine. They did fine. Why am I doing that? What is the point of that?
Don't you keep report cards?
Some.
Yeah, I think you keep a lot of this memorabilia of your kids, and
but to what end exactly?
Because you feel like you're a bad parent if you're dumping out their stuff. I think that's it. I feel guilty about it. Lori from Brockton, thank you for calling.
Hey, Lori, we're talking about clutter. Hi, welcome.
I know you're talking about clutter.
No, I meant for other people. Listen, I knew you knew. Go ahead.
My sister is a thrower-outer, and I am a collector. When my parents died, we cleaned out my parents' house. She was throwing stuff out. I'm pulling it out of the trash. And now,
I love that.
Stuff that I pulled out of the trash, I give to her as gifts.
Good idea, Lori. I like it.
And does she know? Does she have a memory that's good enough to realize that was the crap you...
Oh, yeah.
She does.
She's like, oh, my God, I thought we threw this out. And I'm like, no, you threw it out, and I fished it out of the trash. An antique scrub board, an antique rug beater. And then for her birthday this year, I gave her a 1970s chip and dip bowl that my mother had.
That is really, what a beautiful relationship you two have, Lori. Thank you for sharing that beautiful
Lori,
story.
you bring up a great thing, though.
What is it?
Well, if you have china that is gone through, and not necessarily the expensive china, but just china that your parents or grandparents...
I have from my mother. It's not expensive, it's not special.
That's
it's hers.
something you feel like you...
Why? How about saving one plate?
Because there's something about the china passing through generations, everybody eating off the same plates for like 100 years. Isn't that kind of daunting to think of?
Yeah, it is. But by the way, let me just say two things about this that I'm going to sort of counter my own position around the kids and the artwork. When you finally get the emotional strength to throw out stuff like your kids' artwork, and you've done it, after the initial guilt, it feels incredibly
the weight
satisfying.
is lifted from your shoulders.
Literally and figuratively.
Well, that was Marie Kondo. You feel all. The other thing is you get clothes from people like your parents or your sisters or your grandparents. You don't want to throw them out because they were your grandmother's hat or something. You're supposed to. She says what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to thank them, tell them you love them. Thank them for their service.
And if it doesn't spark joy, toss it.
That's right.
Well, can I give you another recent example?
Makes you feel less guilty.
I haven't even thought about it. I have, I don't want to get in the usual fight we get into about who ran a faster marathon. Decades ago, I ran a couple of New York City marathons.
Yeah.
I have about 800 pieces of memorabilia and my younger daughter yesterday saw one piece of memorabilia that I found a few weeks ago that is a T-shirt from that marathon. She held up the T-shirt and she said to me, one, this would not fit your leg, much less your upper body. And she then went on to say, so why the F, my apologies, are you keeping this? Why am I keeping it?
I don't know, Jim.
Why am I keeping it?
I guess for the same reason you have the ashes of your mother in the trunk of your
that's a
Tesla,
totally different...
la, 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 la.
Chris in a car...
Hold on. One of the texters says, ashes in the trunk can make sense. Sometimes you need traction when the roads are slippery.
That's not funny. That's really, it made Marjorie laugh, but it's not that funny. Chris in a car, what's your deal? We only have a couple minutes left, thankfully. Hi, what's up, Chris?
Hey, long time, first time. I love you.
It.
I love you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, love you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My mother passed away this past January.
I'm sorry.
And she had lived with me for 12 years. I was her caregiver. And I hate clutter, but what I did was I went through her stuff, and anything that kind of caused me to tear up, I put into a memory box.
That's great.
And so I have a box containing a jean jacket she wore that she looks so cute in, some jewelry, some of her fingernail polish. I kept her phone, I kept her glasses, and I donated everything else to a women's shelter because I knew that's what she would want me to do.
You know, that's
You are
perfect.
spectacular.
That's perfect.
I love that.
That's a great thing to do.
How hard was it to get rid of the stuff that didn't make you tear up, that was on the fringe, if you know what I mean?
It was fine because that's just who she was. I knew she would want me to do that. She was always a big supporter of women. She was so upset when Hillary lost. When they took her to vote for a woman for president, she almost cried. She was a brave woman. I knew she would want that to benefit another woman. So it wasn't that hard. And I still have her ashes in my house because you know why? When I thought about spreading them, I thought, where would she want to be? And she would want to be with me.
Oh my God.
So she is. She's in my house.
Chris, that's one of the best first calls ever. I hope you make another one soon. Thank you for sharing your personal story with us. That was pretty beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was great.
I think a lot
You
of
already said at the end about the ashes. He was going to spread the ashes, decided to keep them in the house because where she'd want to be, she'd want to be near me. I mean, that's really quite beautiful.
No, it is beautiful. It's a contrast.
Here we go.
To when your mother forgot you had any children.
That's it. No, my mother was at a cocktail party, and all the other people at the place she lived were complaining about their grown kids. It's a true story. My mother told me this story. And when it got to be my mother's turn, her first words were, "Thank God I never had children." And she realized as soon as the words left her mouth that actually she did have one
there was
child.
Little Jimmy.
Well, I wasn't little
over in
Jimmy,
the corner.
but I was Jimmy, and I wasn't in the corner. And that's the end of the story. I'm glad you brought that up, Marjorie.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're
We're done.
You're very welcome.
We're
very
done.
welcome. Yes.
Show's
and thank
over.
you for listening to another edition of Boston
Thank you.
Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. We have the whole show podcast. And we also have a great new podcast, which is a half-hour excerpt of the show. It's a real quick one. Tomorrow we're going to be joined. Jared Bomer is going to be in for Jim. Jim has the day off tomorrow, so he's going to be with us. We've got some great art stuff on the show. Folks from the Old North Church. They play Revolution Edge, and Jane England of the Wagner Society is going to be with us, plus regulars NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Harvard national security expert Juliet Kayyem, and former public safety secretary Andrew Cabral. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, who just produced a great piece about the House of the Seven Gables. It's on our news website about climate change impacting the House of Seven Gables. Additional support as well from Shay Sullivan. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. And special thanks to the people at the Boston Public Library today, Angelica Marrero, Sandra Lopez Burke, and Brad Lewis. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browning.
Thank you.